was not. It was crazy.
Yep.
Crazy. Speaking of crazy, we're live. How you guys doing?
Oh.
Hello,
everybody.
Let's go into our intro, and then we'll introduce everyone. And we're back here live for another Reels and Heels. And today we're going to be talking about something I think every wrestling fan loves, is the Attitude Era. And I'm looking at a panelist of guests here. One, I'm not sure how he's even here, but
Magic,
huh? So, yeah.
So dumb.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll be here all day.
Kayfabe, Nicole. Kayfabe, Nicole.
So we're here with the young professor.
Oh, Lord.
And Ryan.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Thor, son of Dale, which I'm still scratching my head. As soon as I got a message saying he wanted to be part of the show, I was like, okay.
Interdimensional?
Interdimensional. Yeah. I guess they have internet somehow or something.
I'm on Earth now. You know, the space rent is too high, so I'm crashing at a couple buddies' house. One of the, his birthday would be today if he wasn't dead. R.I.P. Cap.
So, before we go into the subject, we'll kind of go around and everybody can introduce themselves.
You say the weirdest things on here, and we still don't have a catchphrase.
I know. Still got to work on that.
Like, we don't have a sign off, but he can say the weirdest shit when we start. Sorry.
So we'll start with you, Mr. Young Professor. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, hello, everybody. Again, my name is the Young Professor Matt Grafer, a longtime college professor and a current professional wrestling, MMA, and boxing ring announcer, commentator, and manager. So I am deeply rooted actively in the world of professional wrestling and even the most underground of underground, what is still running in the midst of all of this COVID-19. Haters be damned. We are out there. We are still doing it. And I'm lifelong. Well, I'm not lifelong. I got into wrestling when I was about 10 or 11 years old, right as the Attitude Era really started skyrocketing and taking off. So it is a pleasure to be here today to be able to talk about the time that I remember most fondly in the business that I love. And I think everyone here does as well. Maybe even Thor.
Helped a little.
We'll find
All right,
out.
go ahead, Ryan.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Happy to be here. You may have seen me on an episode of this show once before. That was a lot of fun. This might be even more fun. We don't know. Only time's going to tell. But I am the host and producer of the Nerdcast. I talk about movies past and present. I'm also a part of a YouTube channel called Nerd Culture, where we talk about all things nerdy. Kind of going off what Matt was saying, I grew up watching professional wrestling in the year of our Lord, 1998, when the Monday Night Wars were going on between one company and another. Started watching the other company, and then a year or so later, I started watching the WWE, formerly known as WWF, and I enjoyed pretty much every minute of it that I watched across a couple of years. And I'm just here to do three things. One, have fun. Two, electrify the audience. And two, to make sure that this episode of Reels and Heels is just too sweet. Just saying.
You said
Represent,
two
folks.
twice. You said two twice, so
I try.
And our last guest there, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Thor, son of Dale, a.k.a. Thomas Carter Rochester. You can find me all across the interwebs. My alter ego, the nice version, likes to co-host Lights Thunder Action every weekend, where we talk about nerd stuff and the news. And I also host Life of Thor Presents Improv, the Has-Beens of Improv. I forgot my own show. Crap, this isn't going well. And we have fun. I got into wrestling I don't even know what year it was. It was WCW, WCW, back in the, it was pre-NWO, like that goes back. And then we moved away and I no longer had cable, so I couldn't watch wrestling until 2000 when NBC would premiere SmackDown at midnight on Saturdays. So I would stay up every Saturday, watch SNL, then SmackDown, and then stay up and go swimming at 7 o'clock in the morning. Insomnia.
All right. So, man, the Attitude Era was, I mean, I've been a long life wrestling fan. I've been watching wrestling since Hulkamania days. So I'm old.
Well, see, this is one thing that I liked before I even knew you. So normally everything that we talk about on the show ends up being something you introduced to me. So
that's right.
This is Nicole's show now.
Oh, come on, I'm representing. Not the original shirt, unfortunately, because I don't know where that one is. I know I still have it. I just don't know where it's at.
Me either.
But yeah, during this era, your favorite wrestler made his debut. So we'll get to that.
We'll get to him.
But so yes, this was in the middle of the Monday Night Wars. WCW and Billionaire Ted was basically buying everybody. You know, everybody was jumping ship, going over there. They lost Hall, they lost Nash. And then of course Hogan, you know, Savage was over there.
Or no?
Yeah,
Well, Hogan and Savage went over first.
Yeah,
and that was mainly, they were going a different direction. I mean, prior to that, WWF at the time, the World Wrestling Federation, was going through what they called at the time a youth movement, and they were focusing on guys that were very different than, you know, your Macho Mans and your Hulk Hogans that were very, very successful in the 1980s and into the early 90s. And Hulk actually had stepped away because he was doing Thunder in Paradise. So he wasn't even necessarily looking to go back into wrestling. He was out of it, but they swayed him with Billionaire Ted's endless deep pockets, and the war started building.
Yeah, and it's funny he brings up Thunder in Paradise because like so many wrestlers showed up on that show. Like Sting was his arch nemesis. I forgot what the character's name was, but I guess they were both like in the special forces or whatever. Giant Gonzalez was on there. Even like I believe Vader showed up one time. Oh man,
a lot of people showed up.
That was a
Vader time.
Yeah, filmed.
Well,
it
it's like
filmed at Walt Disney World.
The Big Show. Like now, wrestlers are cameoing on that now too. So
yes,
I don't know.
How is that show?
It is adorable.
My kids like it. It's very bad sitcom, so I got through like 10 minutes of one episode, but my daughters love it.
It's what
I love bad sitcoms.
It's what we loved when we were kids. It's very reminiscent of that like hokey, campy, you know,
TV
sitcom.
show,
Yeah, family sitcom, because the boys love it.
So, you know, at this time, WWF they pretty much didn't know what they were doing. I mean, they thought, you know, I don't know, maybe it was Vince that thought, you know, what they were doing before was still working. And so they kept having all those old type of gimmicks. I mean, they had, I'm sure, Matt, you know, all the weird ass gimmicks that they had, you know, leading up to the Attitude Era.
The gobbledygooker.
Oh my god!
That, you know, but that wasn't really. That was an angle that blew off into something that was the most horrible thing ever, and
classic.
That was just strange. But that wasn't really a gimmick because he didn't show up again like ever until like years later when they did the gimmick battle royal in 2001, and the Gooker was in, and I forget. It's one of the. I want to say, I think it was one of the Guerreros was actually the gobbledygooker, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to fact check that while we're talking here. But Duke the Dumpster Drozy, who I'm actually friends with on Facebook now, and he works with a lot of people that I work with. But he was a garbage man that was a wrestler. Of course, Glenn Jacobs, who later became known as someone else that we know. He was Isaac Yankum DDS or I Yankum. He was a demonic dentist with really bad teeth. That was his gimmick, because a dentist also needs to wrestle, and I'm not talking about Britt Baker. She actually is a real dentist that also does it. So yeah, there were a lot of these weird. I mean, even the big boss man at the time, he looked like a prison guard.
Oh my god! Yeah.
Like, why does a prison guard also need to wrestle? Like, these weird other gimmicks were just, they worked before, but the audience in the 1990s really started tuning out and really getting turned off to these kinds of gimmicks. It was not resonating with them the same way, and wrestling had more exposure than ever because it was on major cable networks. And when Monday Night Raw was on, it was on every week. And then Nitro added that to their programming on TNT. So you had two pretty major shows going on all the time. That really was not how wrestling was presented before.
Mm-hmm.
And people were just souring on the way it was working. And Vince kept plowing along because that was the business. But WCW started shifting things. And that's when we started to see the changes that kind of brought up the topics that we're talking about today.
Yeah. And as you see, I brought in Willow. She's our Canadian.
Making a late appearance. Surprise!
How's the weather up there, eh?
You must have
You know
heard
what?
me.
Oddly enough, we have been getting similar weather as you guys in Florida. Very humid, very warm. As you can tell,
Feel like 100.
Let's see what the conversion is.
What is it?
Right now, it's kind of like rainy.
Celsius? No, that's not
That
right.
damn metric system.
It's so much easier. It incrementally goes up accurately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
Americans
here.
think we know better.
Here, it's been so. I think it's been mostly humid
It's human.
than
It's
hot.
It's very humid. Yeah.
And it's been
we're
hot.
We're at 70 degrees.
Oh.
What is
that?
That's hot.
December?
That is what we
That's-
call a
that's what we
cakewalk
call hot.
compared to 95
Oh my
degrees
gosh.
where we are.
Oh my god.
That's nothing. I was going to say Willow's here, but then I'm like, wait a minute, red hair. Lita's in the house today. Thanks for being with us, Willow.
I'm trying to make myself look diva-ish, but some days it doesn't.
Hey.
Me
Well,
too.
if
Very
your mom
well.
was here right now, she'd be very proud of you. She would.
She would.
The
Well,
only
I-
thing that I managed diva was my eye makeup.
I had my chance of being a diva yesterday, where I did a pinup photo shoot with one of my friends. So it's that's the extent of my diva-ness.
Y'all can come
Great
down
job,
to me
though.
and do my hair in victory rolls, and we'll see what happens.
One day I'll figure that out.
So
Well, you did the bangs. I can't do the bangs either.
with the whole WCW thing,
We hijacked your show.
Nitro. Do you remember the date that Nitro made its debut?
Labor Day, 1995, for the Mall of America in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
I knew
No.
Ryan had it. That's why I didn't
Did
answer.
you know that, or did you look it up?
He knows it.
No, I knew it. Plus, I have a lot of videotapes that help me keep my wrestling history brain on cue, so I remember.
Wow.
He's a savant.
Were you one of the tape traders, Ryan? Like, I know that was a thing. I wasn't into that particular culture, but like a lot of people would trade tapes from like different territories and like some of the old Coliseum videos because that was how you traded media. Back, we're going way. We sound old, and I don't think any of us are old, but we sound old just kind of talking about this. But that's how people did things.
Personally, I was not a tape trader, as it were. I just bought a lot of VHS tapes, pro wrestling tapes, I should say, growing up as a kid, and I still have almost all of them. So, for instance, for this specific show, a little peek behind the curtain for you 20,000 people watching at home, I watched the Best of Raw volumes 2 and 3 to get prepared for this show. So I did my homework, guys. I did my homework.
I did my homework too. I drank some beer.
Yeah, that's great. But watching VHS tapes of certain eras of wrestling, those are fun to watch too.
I was a tape maker.
I watched Attitude Era.
Mm-hmm.
Just recording them, yeah. Or are we talking about something completely outside of our?
I bought the tapes. I didn't like actually
Yes,
record.
those?
Well, actually, that's not true. I did record a bunch of episodes of Raw, SmackDown, and some Nitros and Thunders.
Yeah,
But we can talk more about that later.
We did the same thing at my grandparents' house because we had 4 channels because we were very poor in the country, and it would be one VCR recorded Raw, the other recorded Nitro, then one would record Thunder, and then we didn't worry about SmackDown because it came on at midnight. We recorded that at our house, and I would stay up.
I never recorded Raw or anything like that, but I did watch it regularly, and I would be a channel changer. So as soon as the commercial hit, I would change back and forth just because I wanted to see what they were doing.
Yep.
So we had Nitro make its debut, and then of course someone that had jumped ship from WCW to WWF, which was Lex Luger. On that Nitro, he went back to WCW. And I know, like pre-show, we were talking about when we thought, the Attitude Era, because even WWF had, or WWE, whatever, they're always WWF to me. When
You and me both.
they like got the Attitude Era, like I know there were seeds planted, but Matt had said that he definitely thinks that it was sometime in '97. I think officially maybe that's when it started, but I think the seeds were planted when like characters like Goldust and Steve Austin started becoming more different than what the product was used to. I mean, you had Goldust who came in, I believe, in '95. Was it?
I think so. He wrestled Roddy Piper at Mania 12, the same show with the Iron Man match with Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. A lot of people, and didn't they use the stock footage from the O.J. Simpson car chase like in the midst of that WrestleMania? Let us not forget that.
That was glorious. It was golden, dare I say.
But I mean, some of the stuff that Goldust was doing was definitely not the days of Hulkamania. And then you had, of course, people like Sunny, who at first was happy-go-lucky. Then she was playing more into the sexuality of things. A lot of like low-cut stuff and a little bit more boobage.
A lot more.
The Attitude Era was full.
I would have
of
said cleavage, but okay.
Cleavage, yeah, that's
either works.
They were very
Professional
small bikinis, so it was boobage.
Let's just say revealing outfits.
And this is something I don't think WCW was doing until later on. And well, when they started introducing like the Nitro Girls,
Stacy Keibler,
aka Miss Hancock, when she became that in '99.
Ooh, yeah.
There was
with the pants.
Kimberly Page.
Seriously had legs that went forever.
Yeah, 7 foot long. Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Yeah, Kimberly, yes, leader of the Nitro Girls. Can't forget about that.
Yeah. So like in '96, June 23rd is when Steve Austin made that famous speech after winning the King of the Ring. Mm-hmm. And that's when of course Austin 316 promo was born. Do you think this was kind of slightly leaning into the Attitude Era? If this is something that they wanted to go, I mean, I'm sure Vince probably didn't think this was going to take off, and Austin, being the creative that he is, I don't know if he was too 100% behind it. What do you guys think?
Professor,
I don't want to hijack the. I was trying to let one of you guys jump in. For me, I think this was probably the first seed. I know you're making the argument for Goldust, but I think Goldust transformed slowly over time, and we just didn't really notice it because he was still introduced in that era of characters. And you look at Goldust, and he was very much a character. In fact, they were really, I mean, still, it seemed like they were still kind of almost burying the fact that he had any relation whatsoever to the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Like they talked about it. They started working that into his character later, but they really were trying to go a different direction. And he was this Hollywood androgynous character. It was definitely different and certainly melded well with the Attitude Era. But when we think Attitude Era, we're not thinking necessarily of characters that were introduced. We were thinking of more of these guys that had character. And that was really kind of when that started transforming. We're going back to like, the cops and the garbage man and the dentist. Like those were still characters and positions that they held outside. Austin was one of the first genuine attitude-filled guys that showed up and just had a whole different swagger and walk about him. I mean, and he was stunning, or the ring master before that with Ted DiBiase in the $1 Million Championship. And it didn't work. It just, I mean, he was a good wrestler and clearly he had something, but they just hadn't let him cut loose. But when he worked with Jake the Snake Roberts, and that was really kind of a fluke in and of itself, because the rumors and everything that were about at the time was that year was when Hunter Hearst Helmsley was supposed to be the one to go over in the King of the Ring tournament. He was supposed to kind of go to the top, and he didn't because the infamous the Click, the curtain call over at Madison Square Garden right before Hall and Nash jumped ship to WCW happened, and they buried Triple H because Shawn was a top guy. They weren't going to bury him, but Triple H was a nobody, so he was the one punished. And so Austin took advantage of that. Also, that night, when he beat Jake the Snake Roberts, I believe Jake got injured in that earlier in the night, and so the match, the end of the tournament did not go the way that it was supposed to, and there was a lot of active frustration on Steve's part because he didn't kind of get to have the match that he wanted. And when he cut that promo, he really dug into stuff that was personally going on with Jake at the time. Plus, Jake was portraying a slightly different version of himself, where he was that born again preacher gimmick that he had. He wasn't carrying. He was still carrying a python, but he was carrying that albino python at the time called Revelations. He didn't have Damien of the late 1980s. There was a lot of differences there. So I think Stone Cold, when he hit the old Austin 316 promo, it was something that he said and was cool and sounded tough, but it resonated with people in a way that they had never imagined it would, and they just took it off to the races. And I think that was, for the WWF standpoint, was probably the first real nugget of where we eventually got with the Attitude Era.
And that led into Bret Hart versus Austin at Mania that year, didn't it? Was that the same year of 96?
No, that was the next year.
97.
It was 97. So, but that was summer, and that was early on in the next year. But it did lead that way. But Austin was still a heel, and Bret was still a babyface. Bret was the good guy. Austin was a bad guy.
Yeah,
right.
I think what led to the Austin Bret thing was the Austin feud with the Hart Foundation and Brian Pillman, and the whole Pillman's Got a Gun segment from November 4th of 96.
Yeah. That was stuff.
That shook up things because they pissed off the networks a lot. People were scared. They thought it was very real.
Yeah, it was filmed very. I remember Austin was outside and trying to get in, and then it showed him break the glass window on the door to get in.
Look at me, I wasn't watching. We didn't have cable, remember?
That's right.
I said it a million times on the show. We didn't have cable. We were,
poor. Say it. I'll say it for you. We were poor.
Poor.
I did not have cable at that time yet either. I got it maybe a year later.
Deprived. We were deprived.
But the segment actually came off almost like an episode of Cops.
It was very copsy.
Austin was outside, and you can hear him shouting, and they had a camera inside and a camera outside, and Pillman's sitting on the couch with his wife, and he's got his gun and he's loading it, and you can hear Austin say, "Brian, I'm coming for you," and he's coming in, and when the
feed cuts out, when he draws the gun at him, and then everybody thought what happened, and the newspapers were talking about it, they really thought it was a legitimate thing. I remember this is how old I am. AOL chat rooms were talking about it.
Those were fun times.
And look at us now. You went from those kinds of chat rooms to now we've got people talking from all over the place in a room. It's just
we've got
crazy how things have gotten since that time. Yeah,
it's better this way. Yes, at least you can see who's being a creep to you.
Yeah, Professor.
So
sorry.
I'm reading about that segment, and where people really got mad was that they actually Pillman there was actual profanity and it wasn't bleeped.
That's right. Yeah.
Um,
I
I don't
remember
know.
hearing about that because it was
Got it.
definitely bleeped at every other incarnation that I've seen.
yeah, I believe on the network it's probably edited.
The only incarnation of it that I think I ever saw was this wearing.
Yeah.
And that was on the network, so on the WWE network. So
Yeah, so if somebody recorded it with their VCR that night, they have that version of it, but everyone else got the later edited version.
got the
Censorship was
dignified
very
version.
different in the 90s. Yeah.
yeah.
They seem to have relaxed a lot for WWE towards the 2000s and on.
Who's censored now?
I haven't
Will.
like around 95 to 2000. I didn't watch a whole lot because I'm moving around from foster home to foster home, but I was still a huge fan. I would pick up a magazine at a grocery store just to see like who was all the players, and I remember around that time like girl wrestling wasn't a huge big deal, but I mean I grew up with Scary Sherry and all they were just arm candy back then. But then China popped on, and I'm just like, oh, who is this? And that's when I became a fan again, was because the women were starting to have a more prominent role in wrestling. And I fell in love with Lita. I fell in love with China, Stacy Keibler, Trish Stratus.
But because we were finally wrestlers, we weren't just arm candy anymore.
Stratisfaction. Oh yeah.
I mean, and they could hold their own. Like Lita proved it on multiple occasions.
And Jacqueline.
And we won't even. I mean, China doesn't even like. China was in matches with dudes, so it was like,
it was awesome.
She became Intercontinental Champion.
Yeah, Intercontinental Championship match with Jeff Jarrett and Chris Jericho.
She was larger. She really was larger than life. And so like it paved the way for girls that kind of got, that didn't get the same attention, like Jacqueline and Ivory. And, and they all paved the way for like Trish Stratus and all these other women that really did become wrestlers, not just, pretty girls that could,
Yeah, because at this time they were still kind of doing
panty matches.
Yeah, I mean they were still kind of doing the bra and panty matches, and
and like
I mean that was the focus at this time. Even when those ladies were there, that was still the focus. I mean that only until maybe the last 6 or 7 years that was still very much the focus. You had those glimmers of hope with some of these really talented, really athletic women, but even like I mean Stacy Keibler is beautiful. But I was never into her as a competitor because she wasn't a competitor. She was never meant to be one. She was a Nitro girl, and then she was a manager and a character. And her I don't like when they have just hair pulling matches. That never did it for me. I like now when I can tune in and see Charlotte, and I can see Rhea Ripley, and I can see Sasha Banks, and they tear the house down. So they have some of the best matches on the shows each week, and they can work. But back then, I mean, not everybody. Some of the names you mentioned, Jacqueline, Lita and Trish were incredible. Mickey James was incredible. Ivory was very good.
Molly Holly.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the other ones were there just to slap and pull hair and mud fights. And
we had to start somewhere. I mean, like, I think we forget.
Sure.
We want to say how far we've come, but we had to start somewhere. And
everything evolves.
They did.
Time.
They paved the way for what we have now, which is, truly,
you have
competitors,
women who main evented WrestleMania. Well, I mean, that's that's the top right there. I mean, that was never done before.
Like truly main evented, not like
for the last match of the evening.
I mean, even Stephanie McMahon was starting to become very good around that time, and like very big. And what she was trying to do, I know they were trying very hard to make her a bad guy because of her father, but I had a lot of respect for her trying to get the women to be more of a big thing in wrestling, and trying to get trying to get away from her dad's shadow.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard. I mean, Shane was kind of in the same boat. You know, they were both trying to come from his shadow.
But I think
You know, I don't think.
But I think, you know, we have to remember just to caveat that, like, we always talk about how people like ride in on somebody else's coattails, and they were trying really hard to prove that they weren't just their father's children.
Yeah.
Yes,
I think that
very much so.
That wasn't just like, you could be a wrestling dynasty, but you had to strike out on your own and be your own person too. And I think that if that was the case, you know, we had to see it from all sides of that. Like, people are like, well, you know, Dustin Rhodes didn't want to be blah, 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 whatever. Okay, well, nobody wanted to be affiliated with their parents because they didn't want to be like, oh, well, you're just, you know, you're a legacy. So, you know, we won't give you any credit. Like, they wanted credit where credit was due, and they did work. It wasn't like just ended up with the silver spoon in their mouth. Like Shane said, he set up rings and he tore down rings. He did, you know, he did the work too. He didn't just, you know, get to be on TV.
Right.
Well, I don't think they ever tried necessarily to get out from Vince's shadow, but I don't think that they wanted to try to. I think they wanted to show that they belonged once they were given that opportunity. And I think both of them have done a tremendous job of that. You know, regardless of how you get to the dance, getting there is all that matters. But then once you get there, you need to show everybody that you belong. And both of them have done a tremendous job. And Stephanie in particular, I know, I mean, as someone that's actively in the business, that's someone I'd love to meet and talk to, because I have a lot of respect for her. When she's on TV, I hate that woman's guts, and that is real, and that means that she is doing her job, and it's credible, and it makes a lot of sense, and she does it better than most, I think.
She could give a clinic on how to make every single person hate you, and then turn around, go behind the scenes, and have every single person love you and be genuine at both of them. Neither one is really that much of a character. It's just playing in to the diverse personality that we all have as broken vessels.
Right. I remember a lot of stuff that Stephanie was involved in during this time. And I know I'm going to talk about something that was a mistake during this time, but cameras, I mean, it's out there. It's been featured in magazines, and I'm sure it's definitely edited out of the network. But when Triple H did the pedigree to Stephanie onto the announcer's table, and she fell out of her top, I remember watching on USA Network, and like, it actually, they didn't bleep it. It was like, it was there. I know that was happening to a lot of the women because of the outfits that they were wearing at that time. I'm surprised that it doesn't happen as much these days with the outfits that they're wearing, and especially how active they are in the ring. But so we move on from Pillman's.
We've grown a little bit in our construction of brassiere attire, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a lot of rumor and innuendo, though, that all of those were intentional, and I am a believer that they were. They'll say that they weren't, but I think for a lot of it, or they didn't care if it did, because it would generate so much attention, and ratings were so important, and just those, oh, look, oops. But they happen so frequently. Like, you cannot tell me that was not a work, that it didn't work into what they were trying to do and give them some type of edge, because all that buzz made a difference.
Yeah, like when DX would do their promos and point to a girl in the audience, and they would be like,
yeah,
right.
Exactly.
They were doing that at house shows too. I've had friends that go to house shows and said that DX were doing that, and there was ladies doing it. So I don't know if they were plants or if it was actually ladies doing it.
Oh, it was. I mean,
that was the thing at rock concert.
They were just doing it, man.
Okay.
Like,
yeah.
They were born in the
standing in the ring saying, "Hey, lift up your top." You're not gonna do it. Even the wrong kind. I'm gonna get shit.
That's logic
for this, probably. But even the wrong kind of attention is still attention. Like,
hey, that's it.
Any publicity is good publicity.
Right there. Publicity.
I would say after the whole Pillman incident, we head into like early '97, March 10th, and that's when Raw's War is introduced. They have the first hour is Raw. and then the second hour is Warzone.
Mm.
So we're still planting those attitude seeds there.
I never understood the difference, but okay.
Well,
Still the
I'll
same
tell you
show.
something. We were talking about
The same show.
we were talking about censorship a little bit, and one of the things that were handed down, especially after that Pillman incident and all the stuff DX started doing, was the censors came down because this is back when Karens, as we call them now, would write letters into networks and complain about these things. But there were things that you couldn't say on TV at different times. So in that between 9 and 10 p.m. Eastern, certain words were okay and certain weren't. And then from 10 to 11, the second hour of the show, some of those restrictions were rolled back. So for Warzone, there'd be a little bit more colorful language in some of the promos and some of the things that would happen than there were during the Raw is War segment. And that was by design because they wanted to still push that envelope and be edgy, but they had to make it fit within the parameters that were given to them by censors and the networks and their sponsors.
And you can still see that actually today in most TV shows. You know, those TVMA shows like Atlanta, that show is a different level of mature content at times. And the language that they use is just realistic. But, you know, before that, I think that has to come on at 10 Eastern. Before that 10 Eastern spot, it's a no-go. You got to be max, I think it's TV 14. And then before that, it's TVPG. That's it. Yes.
Well, I think some of that also differs between cable networks and network television. Even still, it's arbitrary now. I mean, because the restrictions are rolled back so far now compared to what they were then.
Yeah, and I'm definitely talking about
but it does still exist. Yeah.
Yeah. So at this time when they introduced Raw's War, this is basically them putting Raw against Nitro. Because the year before we had the NWO emerge at WCW, Hogan, which was like still to this day, there's no bigger swerve than Hogan turning heel. So we head into WrestleMania 13. And this is when we talked about earlier, you know, the whole Bret Hart, Steve Austin feud. This is the submission match that everybody remembers him passing out. He had all that blood.
What a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was
great cinema.
Wasn't anybody who's blood.
Have you guys watched? Have you watched the interview Austin did with Bret Hart on the network on the Broken Skull sessions?
Dude, I love those Broken Skull sessions.
That was
they really go into that.
I really hated Bret Hart a lot less after that.
Excellence of execution.
Bret, you gotta remember, Bret Hart was beloved before that. Like people loved Bret Hart. He was a hero.
Especially in Canada.
Yeah, Willow knows. Oh yeah.
Especially in Canada.
Oh yeah, he's still a hero. He always was, even when he was at his worst.
He's the best there is, best there was, best there ever will be, Willow.
And it wasn't even in-ring stuff. It was, I stood outside of Just Play Media for 4.5 hours to get his book signed, and he was a douche. And so I was irritated. I was just angry, and I get, okay, I was only probably 18 at the time, so give me some, you know, opportunity to grow and change as an adult. Like I get that people have bad days now. But if somebody's waiting 4.5 hours, don't be a douchebag to them while they're waiting in line. That's
so. What did he do that was particularly douchey? I'm curious.
I expected when he signed the book that there would be some sort of conversation that he didn't, that he responded to in a more positive way, as opposed to
not feeling forced. Like
I gotta be here to sign this book for you. You're like, that's how I felt. And I was like, I'm standing there with my boyfriend. We're buying, you know, we each bought a copy. I don't even know if I have my copy. I think I might have given it to him, but we both had a copy so that he would sign both of them. And, you know, he, like, my boyfriend just raved and on and on and on and on and on. And he just acted like it was, you know, I've heard this 1,000,000 times, you know, and I had a bad taste in my mouth. And I'm sorry. I hated him less. And Stone Cold helped me paid him less. Sorry, Willow.
You know,
no.
that sounds lousy.
All wrestlers.
You know,
have
I'm
that,
sure
yes.
everybody has a different experience with him. My experience with Bret Hart came like way later, and after his career and everything. He appeared at one of our in Winnipeg at one of our conventions, and I couldn't go because I had to work. And I worked at I work at Starbucks. I worked at the Starbucks near our airport, and one of my friends came in, and I'm like, "Oh, how was Bret Hart? How was his appearance?" So he goes, "He's just over here, and he's waiting for a coffee that I'm making." And so I'm just like, "Oh, hi." So I got a chance to meet him, shake his hand, talk to him a little bit, and he seemed like he was a great guy. So
yeah, I mean, sometimes circumstances do it. I've met Kevin Nash twice, and both times I was really like, wow, this guy is not a nice, cool guy, like to fans. Like that was the whole gist I got from Kevin Nash.
I can corroborate with that because I met Nash at the grand opening of WCW Nitro Grill in Las Vegas.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I got that same feeling. But I got that same feeling from Scott Hall as well. So.
Yeah, they do.
I met Scott and Kevin at something a couple of years ago. That was my second time seeing Kevin Nash in person, and Scott Hall couldn't have been nicer. He was awesome. He was really sweet. I mean, I was there with my daughter, and he was really cool with her, and that's always it for me. Like when these guys are cool with my kids, that's always great. But we did a meet and greet with Kane and the Undertaker a couple of years ago while Kane was running for office in Knoxville, because my family actually lives in Knoxville now. And we drove, man, I found out we could go. I spent a bunch of money to go. We drove all the way up there. You know, I had to take off days of work that I didn't really have to take. We all went, and they overbooked the crap out of it. And we waited for hours and hours, and we got in, and it was definitely disappointing. But I don't fault either of them, but they overbooked it, and you could tell they were so fried. Like they weren't trying to not be friendly. They were as beat up as we were waiting outside and stuff and having to, glad hand everybody for hours. So it was not the experience I wanted, but made for a good photo op and, check it off the bucket list.
Yeah. So back to this match with Steve Austin and Bret Hart. Still one of I think, the best matches at Mania. Well, that Mania in particular, but out of any Mania, this was definitely what they would call the double turn. This is when Steve Austin did his turn and Bret Hart did his turn. Bret Hart was already frustrated in the company with Vince, and he has his long-standing beef with Shawn Michaels inside and outside of the ring. Where does this match and storylines hit with you guys? I'll start with you, Matt.
I mean, for me, it's only something that I've looked back on because it was probably 5 or 6 months before I started watching. So, I mean, I've obviously gone back and seen it and experienced it retroactively, but it was right before I started watching. So I can't say that it's one of my fondest memories. But in terms of its importance and what it did, it's tremendous. And really, it's one of those big things that was a swing point for what became the Attitude Era, because Austin was cool. And even though he was a bad guy, people were getting into him because the 90s were more about being rebellious and the anti-hero. The bubblegum, hey, this is a good guy, take your vitamins and say your prayers. That wasn't doing it anymore. And Bret Hart still had some of that. He was a classic good guy. People were getting kind of tired of that. So for them to structure that match the way they did, and for Bret to win that match the way he did, and for Austin to lose it the way he did so that he didn't look weak, it didn't really stop any of his momentum. It really did so much for both guys at the time and really had a major, major impact on the entire industry.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I've always been a fan of Austin, even when he was stunning Steve in WCW, and was excited to see him come over to WWF. But yeah, this character, that started in '96 when He just basically didn't care. You know, he piled through everybody. So we hit August 3rd, 97. And this was Austin versus Owen Hart, which was SummerSlam. Which the match didn't go exactly as planned. This would put Austin on the shelf for a little bit. Can I just say how much I miss Owen Hart?
It's your show. You can say
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
Owen Hart was one of the greatest in the ring. Such a tragic ending to his life. But this match, I remember from lots of interviews, Owen was distraught after the match. Like he totally didn't mean to land the way he did. And I don't think Austin really held a grudge.
You know, he did. There's a lot of stuff that says he was never, like, they never really buried the hatchet. Austin was pissed at him because I believe they talked about the move beforehand and said not to do it, and Owen did it, and Steve never forgave him, and then we had Owen's untimely death a couple years later, and so I don't think they ever really got on a good foot again after that.
I think you always look like you make nice, and maybe in retrospect, because I don't remember, did he and Bret talk about any of that? During that time when he was talking about how he had never hurt anybody in the ring and that's what he was most proud of?
Yeah, I don't think they mentioned, the network doesn't mention Owen much. I mean, they're really
probably not allowed to.
There's still a lot of bad blood there.
I think sometimes for the sake of the company, you just don't say what you think is a huge elephant in the room, but what you say is what people hear. So maybe he just didn't talk about it very often.
But I mean, how much of that feud is generated by the company, or was there a genuine feud between Owen Hart, and brain fart, Owen Hart and Steve Austin? I know that. McMahon loved to create feuds.
It was a storyline. It was a storyline that had good heat. It really stemmed out of that Bret Hart and Stone Cold match back at WrestleMania 13. But and it didn't really last too much long after that. I mean, Stone Cold got his revenge eventually and stayed on with the Hart Foundation. But I mean, I just think that there was a little it really just stemming from the injury. From everything I've read and heard them talk about, was Austin really was not happy with it. I think one of Bruce Pritchard's podcasts really talked about it. If you guys listen to Something to Wrestle With, there's a lot of really good takes on a lot of this particular stuff from this time period there that could really give you some good insight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I won't be watching.
I will say this. This injury to Stone Cold, as devastating as it was, and obviously it's a bad thing that it happened, there was some good that came out of it, as odd as that might be to say, and that has also been acknowledged, because Steve was so hot and they didn't want to lose that momentum, but he hadn't really peaked yet. He was still on his way up. They didn't want to lose him on TV. He never missed any TV time. I mean, Brian, you said he was on the shelf. He was, from terms of active in-ring competition, but he was on the show the night after, and he was on every show for the next few months. But that's when he really was digging in and doing everything on the microphone. All those promos that he cut really strengthened his character and really started changing the tide. So it was bad, but because he couldn't do anything in the ring, they focused more on his character, and that might have done more.
Yeah, it was like a 3 months where he couldn't really do in-ring stuff. But yeah, that's when he was doing those promos, and I think that's when the whole promo thing was starting to change, because it was way different than what the promos of Savage and Hogan and all those. I don't even know. I mean, it was definitely more attitude. You would see more wrestlers start doing promos like that. And
Yeah.
speaking of promos, shortly after SummerSlam, we had the return of Rocky Maivia. And you talked about how, people didn't like the Hulk Hogan and the Bret Hart goody two-shoe. He comes back and joins the Nation of Domination. And this is the birth of The Rock. Which, to me, is the great... I know they say Ric Flair is the greatest promo, but you know what? I think The Rock is the best.
That's up for interpretation, but I think that the character that The Rock plays on TV, like in the ring, is just that. It's a character. And so, like, when you're talking to Ric Flair, that's Ric Flair. Like, everything he talked about was what he was doing. Like, he was the real person. So I guess it depends on what you were thinking, like what you consider. Like, if you're an old wrestling versus new wrestling Attitude Era fan, I think you kind of like, you pay homage to the fact that that's where it came from. I think that, Ric Flair paved the way for people to give crazy,
Yeah. And
promos like that.
Since we're talking about Attitude Era here, we're here in '97. Rocky's back, joining the Nation of Domination, and so they were looking like that was a kind of a heated thing. I mean, if you look at what race, the race relations now that we're having, if you look at what the Nation of Domination,
but the same thing was happening in 1997, like that same the same kind of atmosphere we have now is very much like what we had back then. And so when Nation of Domination came, there was a force to be reckoned with. I think it became kind of a lot of the things that were playing out in the ring were also playing out in our in our media lives. So
yeah,
it was pretty huge at that point.
So do you guys have a take on the whole Rocky Maivia, becoming The Rock and joining Nation of Domination? I mean, we're getting further here into the Attitude Era. We're about to come to what is going to be the beginning of probably the best feud in that.
This moment was definitely a catalyst for people realizing how good The Rock truly was, because before he was just athletic. And they didn't give him, he had generic promos because he was a generic good guy. And as soon as he became the bad guy, and he wrote, according to his book, The Rock Says, ellipses, that he wrote most of this promo. And I think he went back, I don't know if Brian Garrett's was there at the time, but he had a writer look over it with him, and they went back and forth on it. And he's like, I need to speak from the heart. And that was really the beginning of not just The Rock as a character, but The Rock as a person, because I'm going to go ahead and say that The Rock is the greatest promo guy of all time, because today, working in the film industry, what was it, D23 last year, when he went out and talked about Jungle Cruise, there were two people in the entire day's lineup who went out and talked without notes or a teleprompter, and that was Kevin Feige for the MCU and The Rock. And he went out and put on a show for about 35 minutes with Emily Blunt. And it was all just, I'm assuming it's pretty much all just off the dome with a little bit of rehearsals. But that was really the beginning of his ability to show the world what he can sell. And it all comes from having just a wonderful gift of gab.
He's definitely a showman. I think that has proven
well said,
true.
Thor.
The greatest showman.
I hated him. I hated him when he came in, which was what I was supposed to do. But I remember hating Rocky Maivia, and when the Rocky sucks chants started, and Die Rocky Die, which is a really evil chant, and that was they would put that on the Titantron, like they would have that, like Stone Cold would point to it. It would say Die Rocky Die, and they'd highlight those signs in the arena. He did a really good job of getting in as a heel. And what was really interesting, I thought, with him was the Nation of Domination was a heel group. They were bad guys.
Yeah.
And he was like a bad guy to them. Like he was a bad guy in the bad guy group. But it didn't make him good. It just made him worse. Like he was always trying to usurp Farouk and do the, when he gave all the guys in in the nation, gold Rolexes, but he saved the best present for Farouk.
Yeah, Farouk.
But it was just a picture of him, and like everybody else got like
title.
$20,000 Rolexes. It was, I mean, you just hated him more, and you weren't even supposed to like him to begin with. But like you felt almost bad for the rest of the nation of domination, which you weren't even supposed to feel. So he really started resonating with audiences and generating a lot of just a lot of reactions in a lot of different ways.
Yes, definitely.
But he was kind of a similar heel like Stone Cold was. Like he said the things we wanted to say. Like, I mean, like there were a lot of times I would come home after work and I'd be like, if I could just say that shit to my boss. Like, I would love to hold my breath when I walked away, but he said it, and I mean, Rocky did the same thing. I think that he did what we all kind of wanted to do, like, piss off. I'm gonna do it my own way, and
he has the greatest uncensored moment in Raw history, and I will go to bat for this. Booker T and Shane, one a punk ass sucker, the other a silver spoon motherfucker. And Stephanie didn't cut him off in time. So they said that live on TV, and we had the VHS, and my dad rewound that 20 times. He goes, that motherfucker said motherfucker on TV.
That promo actually rivals.
Endlessly good promos from The Rock, man.
I was going to say that promo rivals to what Booker T did in WCW.
Oh, you can't even talk to him about that. He gets so upset that clip is still out there.
Yeah, man. It was Sherry and Harlem Heat talking about Hogan, and I'm not gonna say what he said, but he knew it as soon as he said it. He was
you could see him. He broke character. He was
as soon as he said it, he goes, oh.
And Sherry, you can see.
And Sherry looks at him with wide eyes.
I'm gonna go.
And Mean Gene. Damn it, Mean Gene Okerlund, the consummate professional, no sells the shit out of it. He just goes, and Stevie Ray, what do you have to say? And just like it didn't happen. A true pro in every sense of the word.
We miss you, Mean Gene.
So we go into September of '97, and Raw's War, Vince McMahon receives his first Stone Cold Stunner. And this elevates the Attitude Era. We go up and up and up from here.
Yeah.
Seriously.
A lot of people want to do that to their boss.
I just want to say that first stunner, Vince, the way he sold that, I can still see it.
It's the stunner heard round the world.
It's so ugly. It was so bad. It was so ugly. But I think it was supposed to be. He said, "Did you like it?" I hated how he sold it. It was just like when he did it to any of the announcers. It looked awful. It looked terrible.
It was the worst possible acting ever. But then you kind of expected. I mean, you expected it when Vince came to the ring. Like you just expected it to be bad. You were like, "Oh, he's getting in the ring again."
Yeah, and then like he's laying there on the mat, and I'm like, "Are you having a seizure?"
You just die already? Like
so much.
Oh my god! So at this point of the Attitude Era, like I said, this is where it basically everything just goes up and up and up. And if you flip the script and you turn the channel, and what is WCW at this point doing? Matt, I'm sure you might want to say what.
I remember. Diamond Dallas Page was probably in the race for the United States Championship because that's kind of where he was. I remember some of that. Cruiserweight action was always good, and that was always fun. And then you just had the NWO running roughshod on everybody, and you just hated all of them. And then more guys would join, and you hated that too. Yeah, you were just so aggravated by it.
Goldberg, or is this before Goldberg?
This is before Goldberg. Goldberg showed up later.
Okay.
Was he? He was there, but he wasn't a thing, right?
No, yeah. Well, he debuted in September of '97 against Hugh Morris on Nitro.
Hugh Morris
and fought him like 50 times on Nitro before he started fighting before he started wrestling other guys.
Well, whatever. He had his first match.
It worked. It was good.
Yeah, I mean, it was in September of '97 when Bill Goldberg came in, and then he became Goldberg in early or what was it, like early January, February of '98 when he went up against Steve Mongo McMichael on Thunder when Thunder debuted. Fun fact for the kids watching at home.
Yeah. So as you can see, what WCW was doing. I mean, pretty much the only thing they had really going for them was match-wise was the cruiserweights. I mean, you had Rey Mysterio and Psychosis and La Parka. I mean, you were Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero.
I would say it's some of the best cruiserweight. Like
the cruiserweight division's incredible.
Division ever. Like,
yeah, I mean that's what WCW really had going for it. I mean,
Billy Kidman.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Shooting
I
Star
loved Billy
Press.
Kidman.
You had Raven's
Yep,
Flock.
loved it. But the Shooting Star Press was called the 7-Year Itch.
Yes.
Because he was in Raven's Flock and he'd always
wearing
be
the
scratching
shirt, going
and
like this all the time.
the 7-year itch. Yeah.
I got an itch back here.
Yeah, he's just like a tweaker that wrestles really well.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. Good cruiserweights back in the day, kids.
So we head into October 5th, 1997.
Jeez.
Hell in a Cell match is introduced at Bad Blood in your house. And this was Undertaker, Shawn Michaels. And then we see the repackaged Glenn Jacobs debut as Kane. Oh, man, this match.
So this is my favorite moment in all of wrestling ever.
Wow.
This one right here. It's the one, you talk about pay-per-views and how like having the network now is so nice. Like just the $10 each month and you can just watch whatever in the pay-per-views. You figure you watch like 2 pay-per-views and it's paid for the whole year when you think of it just in those terms.
Yes.
But back then, and it was on, like, I didn't even have the capability for, like, my cable was so basic. I don't even think I could order it if I wanted to. I remember watching scrambled WWE pay-per-views because there was a channel and you'd kind of see things and you just hear the commentary. I'd listen to just JR and the King, just on scrambled pay-per-views. But my great aunt, my mom's aunt, she must have had some kind of illegal box or whatever people had back then where you could get the pay-per-views for free, and she taped it for me. And man, she used to fuck up every name of everything so bad, and like she just would give, like, she recorded it and wrote on the tape instead of Bad Blood, she wrote Bloodbath. Like, just she knew blood was in there and it was with a B, and she she taped it and gave it to me. I was like, what the hell is Bloodbath? But it was Bad Blood. And
reading's hard.
I was always so drawn to the Undertaker. In fact, that was what lured me into watching the program in the first place, was because a friend of mine was telling me all about his character and the stuff with Mankind and the Boiler Room, and when he burned his face, and that he had this brother that's still alive and he might be out there. I was fascinated with that story. I mean, it was the most fictional part of everything, but I was so interested and invested in it. And when Kane showed up and the Undertaker's face and just this stemmed out of that, my God, it was that. This is my favorite thing that ever happened to this day. That's it for me.
That's a great commentary.
This is our friend Terry, who
Terry.
is over in Ireland. So this is, I can just see them.
Terry's awesome, by the way, folks.
I could
Terry's
be
a really
with-
good guy.
It was like 9:00 screaming that, at the pay-per-view. It's like somebody screaming it in your house at 3:40 a.m.
Yeah.
Insane.
I remember Kane, years later, of course, he was telling the story about how he almost didn't make it to his debut because his car broke down.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. I
Wow.
did not know that.
Man.
That's
It was
crazy.
in a broken skull session.
Yeah, he was talking about it.
Yeah.
His car broke down and he had to somebody had to come pick him up, and
Oh my gosh.
the car that picked him
Because
up.
he was riding with some guy in St. Louis. Yeah.
Yeah. And he said he made it with 20 or 30 minutes to spare.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
Man.
Yeah. So he comes out, he rips the door off of the Hell in a Cell.
He raises hell.
It was impressive.
He started a trope. He started that trope.
Yeah. So what do you guys think of the actual match between Michaels and Taker, though? I think Michaels was hurting, though, with his back problems, because this was right around the time that he was going to face Austin at WrestleMania. So
this was before the big injury, though, because that happened in January at the Royal Rumble of '98 against the Undertaker in the casket match.
Yeah.
Well, I thought he had back issues a little bit before because of all.
Yeah, I think he always did. Yes,
because the stuff that he was doing with the Rockers, I mean, they were doing a lot of high flying stuff, and of course his ladder matches with Razor Ramon.
Yeah.
Well, you can't expect.
He was beat up, but this match is great. People don't talk about it because the Mick Foley, the Mankind Undertaker Hell in a Cell really kind of overshadowed it. And the Kane entrance is really the biggest, most significant thing from this match. But the match itself, when you go back and watch it, especially with what we saw from from the Undertaker and Shawn Michaels years and years later, it's a great match. It really is awesome and really kind of highlights both guys' strengths and shows why Shawn Michaels can hang with those guys that are, so much bigger than him. It's really awesome to go back to.
Yeah, definitely. I've probably since the original airing, I've seen that match, I don't know, a handful of times.
We've watched it at least twice.
Yeah. So speaking of Shawn Michaels, we moved 2 weeks later to October 13th, and this is the birth of DX.
Oh, of course it's on October 13th. What a classic date for DX to start.
Which it's the initial group, which was Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Rick Rude, and Chyna.
Rick Rude.
That's just funny. Like when I think of Degeneration X, I don't think of Rick Rude, but
this would lead to the infamous.
I mean, I know Rude. The history. I just don't.
They even made a joke about Rick Rude being on Raw and Nitro the same night.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they did it by bringing in Harvey Whippleman, and they dressed him up the same way, and then they just kicked his ass to say, "This is how important you were. Like, we replaced you and shit all over you, and you're gone now. Like, we're done." So there's a reason you don't remember Rick Rude. He probably, if he had stayed, it probably would have been cool, and they could have done more. But he was very overshadowed by what the core three were doing at that time.
I have my phone is ringing over here somewhere.
Uh-oh. Vinnie Mac is calling on line 2, folks. Watch out. No, he's not watching this shit.
Yeah, we're fracked if he's
today?
watching.
I don't think he is. He what Vinnie Mac doesn't know isn't going to hurt him, right? It's not going to happen. No one cares.
Yeah, just like when he died and Donald Trump didn't know if he was dead or alive.
When we talk,
that's quality television.
I just want to say it's probably the best storyline moment that I remember watching live on TV, because it ended and I looked at my dad and I went, I'm mind you, I'm too young to say this, but I go, what the fuck was that? And he goes, I have no goddamn idea, son. And then I think it was the next week that they had to break kayfabe because of the
Benoit.
The Benoit.
Yeah.
Benoit balls.
Yeah.
Bringing it back to a happy note, November 9th. Montreal Screwjob.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
Yeah, that was a happy time, wasn't it? No.
Oh my God.
No, it wasn't good for wrestling or the media outside of wrestling.
See, I think it was good for wrestling. And
really?
It was very good for wrestling.
Because of the stuff that it generated after. I mean, that led into the next, it was the next night where we get Bret screwed Bret. And then Vince McMahon becomes the ultimate villain in the entire corporation. In the entire company, not corporation. We hadn't gotten there yet. And then that leads to building Mankind and the relationship that the fans have with Mankind, and The Rock up to becoming WWF champ at that time, which then led to the downfall of the corporation when The Rock turned and all that insane crap that happened. That was really like, when I think of the Attitude Era, everything before the screw job is like, okay, like that's good. But at that point, everything hit the fan on a smack different level. And then that leads to, just a few months later, Austin wins. And I always look at that as the the changing of that's the official start of the Attitude Era in terms of WWE and how they were programming from that point forward.
Yeah.
And that's just because I started in late 99, 2000. So I came in after the Attitude Era had already started. I'd been told all of these stories. These were legends, all these stories. The Screwjob, Austin 316, Kane debuting. Those were legends to me because I never watched that. And then once we found out we had SmackDown, then I started getting into it. And I got in. And the first people that I was like, I like them was the Hardy Boys. Everybody else, I was like, yeah, it is what it is. They had long hair. They wore baggy jeans and skin tight shirts. Weird.
Now, I don't have the date, but before the screw job, was it the when Bret had that huge meltdown? Was it the pay-per-view? I'm trying to remember.
No, he had a meltdown.
I know what you're talking about. I think it was earlier than that. I think it was actually a long time before this that what you're talking about when Bret had that big meltdown and was screaming and yelling in the ring and about Vince. But I think some of that was worked. Like they knew that was going to happen. They framed it later like they didn't, like it was Bret showing his frustration. But I'm pretty sure that was Bret just still being in character and being this heel version of himself.
Right, but this was leading up into the screw job because it played a part with what would happen between Vince and Bret backstage, which we didn't really know until we saw his documentary Wrestling with Shadows. So the screw job, it's been talked about so many times. Do you really want to?
Can we skip it?
Yeah. So
it happened.
It happened, and Dark Side of the Ring did an entire episode on it. We can move on.
I mean,
I know we were talking though that we were trying to figure out when the Attitude Era started. That's always up for debate, but I think when the screw job happened, that's how you knew you were firmly in the Attitude Era. That's when I'm like, all right, because again, Thor, you were talking about it. So much came out of that. I mean, you didn't even mention that the Austin McMahon came out of that.
Yeah.
And that's really the biggest, most significant one. But like, there are so many storylines and things that were so important to wrestling and the WWF at this time that really emanated from that Vince McMahon turn. Because he was just Vince McMahon, this commentator who apparently owned the company. It was never really acknowledged like that before, to turning into Mr. McMahon, who became the authority figure and was in fact the real owner of the company. So that realism kind of helped make people question.
But he became a character in himself too, because it was
after Montreal. Yeah,
like he was the ultimate heel.
At
least for me.
Right, and he was just a guy before that. He was just an announcer.
Hey Matt, can I hear that Briscoe again? Because that was pretty good.
Well, Mr. McMahon, that's as far as it goes. There's no more words after that.
He's like, I just got that one line.
All I got.
I lose how the rest is supposed to happen.
Ooh, McMahon.
We need to pull that. They need to pull that out of the segment and then play that. Like we need it on the loop. Okay, did you want me to do the next one?
Yeah, go ahead and talk about the next thing here.
What was the next one?
November 17th. I don't know if that was the date he was.
I know in December we've got In Your House Degeneration X. I know that's coming up somewhere.
Well, okay.
You're gonna go through every month of every year now?
No,
December 15th, it says Vince McMahon formally introduces the new era of the WWF programming in a taped message on Raw's War. Raw and Warzone are the cure for the common show. And so,
I was branding it different. Yeah.
And so there was then it kind of ushered in March the Attitude logo, the
scratchy logo.
Yeah. And then can I just go to the WrestleMania then?
Yeah, we're there. We're already there. March 29th.
March 29th. This is
Steve Austin.
Iconic.
Yes.
The Austin era has begun. I can't do a JR.
Well, because
I'm so sorry. I tried.
Stone Cold. Stone Cold.
Stone Cold.
Stone Cold.
Stone Cold. I can do that.
Stone Cold.
I just can't do Austin. Play
Austin.
Austin. I can't do the Austin.
Well,
Guess the count. 1, 2, 3. New champion.
Was it?
I can do a decent JR
A
impression.
couple of weeks before that, Mike Tyson came out on Raw, and they had that big segment where they had to separate Tyson
and Austin are going out.
They're sharing like
That might have even been in January. It was all in that build. It was a long build.
He was going to be appearing at WrestleMania.
Yeah, and it's important to remember this
and he
was
showed up,
post
and that's when the brawl happened.
Ear situation. So Tyson was considered deranged at this point. I remember the night after that happened. I remember listening to the news because I couldn't sleep, insomnia, and they were just talking that Mike Tyson is deranged because he bit a guy's ear, and then someone. I don't know if it was someone in the house or someone on the news said that Mike Tyson's a pussy because he couldn't win the fight, so he bit his ear off. And I was like,
probably in the house, because I don't think they would say someone was a pussy on TV in 96 or 7. Or 7 or 8. Yeah.
I assume it was in the house, but but I remember that, and I go, I guess so. I mean, I've lost some fights. I never bit the guy's ear.
But I remember that shove that he flips Tyson off, and Tyson like pushed him, and I don't know if Tyson knew how hard he was pushing Austin, but Austin went back a little bit. And Austin's not a small dude. And then that ring.
You genuinely felt like there was an energy.
I was like,
real heat.
Real heat. A lot of energy in that arena that night.
Well, the pull apart was great. Like, they looked like they were really trying to get after each other, and they were fired up, and there were a million guys trying to keep these two away from one another. It was executed very well.
I thought the ring was going to collapse.
The news of them fighting wound up on the local news where I was and all around the country. It was like, this is real, guys. Like, this wrestler and this boxer are actually going to try to kill each other on live television. I'm like, oh, geez. It was they covered it well on Raw, but when it shows up on your local media on the actual news, like, that means it's real.
That's a big deal.
Two guys are going to kill each other.
Crossover appeal. Vince has always been good about leveraging that. That's why he brings in all these celebrities, and a lot of the wrestling purists always complain about people stealing their spot. It's like, man, this guy is trying to make it and get exposure to other eyeballs everywhere. That's more money in their pocket. That's what the game is.
Remind me, did this, the trope is whenever someone tries to hold two guys back these days, it just doesn't happen. I feel like that was a thing forever. They actually held them apart on this one, didn't they? Like,
probably because Tyson's not an actual wrestler, and they did not actually want to have them have real contact. They're both, combat sports athletes, but like, Tyson didn't have a wrestling contract, and if they actually really did anything, it would have been really damaging for his brand and for his sponsors and fights and the boxing commissions, etc. So,
which I have to say made it that much better. Like, whenever they're like, you got to hold them back, I'm like, oh God, now we get 15 minutes of them breaking out because no one knows how to hold the sweaty guy down. You just jab him in the ear, and then he goes, oh, what are you doing, dude? And then they forget they're trying to fight. We've all been there, right, Professor? Right.
We certainly have. Yes, thank you.
So, like that's what helped build that even more, because they actually kept them apart, which is so rare in wrestling.
And once again, our age and the AOL chats were blowing up. Like, I remember people saying,
AOL? I don't know her.
They were like, I wonder what would happen if Austin and Tyson actually got into it. I mean, people are like saying, oh, Tyson would have knocked him down with one punch. And like, people are like, no, Austin would have taken it. And
I think it was well played, because he probably really was the only person in the company that could have scrapped his way through. Like, Austin didn't back down, and he still doesn't back down today. So
Austin,
he finished the match with a broken neck.
I mean,
right? That is genuine toughness. That, Kurt Angle is a guy who won the Olympic gold medal with a broken neck. When you break a neck,
a broken freaking neck,
freaking neck. Once you break your
thank you, correction. Yeah,
it's believed that I might have been born with a broken neck. I can guarantee you that nerve endings get fried after that. So to be able to take a punch and be punch drunk but still go, I've been there.
Well, and I think it's formidable enough. Like, I think that he'd solidified his badassery already to kind of like to pull it off. Like, I think that's what sold it.
Well, it was his gimmick, but it was so believable. Like he seemed like a genuine badass, and they're really, I don't know that there's anybody that would refute it, especially with an injury like that, for him to keep going. Like, wow, this guy actually is a badass. So there's a lot of credibility there. And plus, I mean, he's the top guy in WWF, the top boxer in the world, regardless of what happened with the Holyfield fight. He was called the baddest man on the planet. So to have these two badasses square off against each other just made so much sense from an entertainment perspective.
Yeah. And I remember DX was courting Tyson like for weeks.
Yeah.
In promos, and then of course, he ended up being aligned with DX
for the show, and then we get the quick count, and then he just rips it off Hogan style and is like, haha, I was Austin 316 this whole time, and I still don't understand that, but okay. It's okay. It worked.
It
And
was
he went from that.
Yes. So
My visual aids to help with this storytelling.
Yeah, the two T-shirt visual aids we've seen, they're really good. Don't get me wrong.
That happened later, right?
With DX and Austin 316, Matt. But no worries. I know you got plenty in the wardrobe.
Yeah. So there's
a lot going on back here. There's
in the wardrobe, yes.
So this puts Michaels out after this match, and he's out for basically
years.
4 years.
Okay. 5 years, or 4 or 5. Yeah.
It felt like so much longer, but it's wild to look back and go, "Oh, 4 years. That's not long at all." But it's just how much that company changed before he came back, like aggressively night and day. Like the Attitude Era, we've gone on for an hour and a half almost, and we haven't even gotten to the year 1999. We're not even halfway through 98.
Oh.
We're like
Yikes.
2-ish years through this, and it feels like it was so long, but it was like maybe 5 years overall. Like the Hulkamania era lasted 8-9-ish. When did he win? He last won the title in WrestleMania 9, right? So it lasted
almost a decade.
Over a decade.
From 84 to 92 or 3, something like that. Yeah.
Almost a decade.
Yeah. So the Attitude Era was like lightning in a tiny little bottle, which is, moving on. Sorry.
Moving on. So with Michaels gone, we get the new DX led by Triple H. We see the return of X-Pac. Well, 1, 2, 3 Kid, but he calls him X-Pac. The reimagination of the Nation of Domination. Yeah, the Rock takes over the Nation, and then the New Age Outlaws join the group DX at the end of that Raw.
No, Doug, Jesse J.
So
badass Billy Gunn. Sorry,
I do have to say that the DX promos before Triple H was in charge are still a little bit better, but the Triple H promos with DX are still, I think, up there. I just remember the older ones, especially with Sergeant Slaughter, how they would always come out with the face mask and they would and when they were barbecuing the wieners.
Oh boy,
that was a fun trope that lasted till their return. Yeah.
Well, there was a turn. When Michaels left, that was the last night that DX were bad guys. Because the next night, when Triple H took over and X-Pac came in and they brought in the Outlaws, they were full babyface from then on. They were completely endeared with the crowd versus being like, I hated them when they were wearing the face mask with Sergeant Slaughter, and we could probably use those now in everyday life. They were really ahead of the curve preparing
now
for 2020.
They were so prepared.
Yeah.
But at that point, everything
Social
was a
distance
party then.
champions, 1998.
Yeah. And so basically, this is when DX declares war on WCW. I remember watching Nitro, and like you can actually hear them pounding on the steel grate. If you're watching Nitro, they were trying so hard not to reference it, but when they were backstage doing the segments, you could hear Triple H and them pounding on the thing. It's so hilarious.
That's awesome.
I was watching it. Like,
Well, you hear Bischoff now goes, "We wish we let them in." Because
Yeah.
what if they did? Like, it actually would have done more for WCW than no selling it. Like, no selling it was the worst thing they could have done.
Because then, if they get into a physical altercation, then it's a genuine legal matter, and fuck.
Yeah.
Right.
So okay.
Then Vince gets sued, WWF gets sued, and they all face charges.
So it would have been Disney
trespassing.
versus Fox before Disney acquired it. Okay.
Exactly. You right.
So that's the next one that is on there.
It's very true. It did happen. 83 consecutive weeks.
Yes.
So April 13th, 1998 was the first time, 84 weeks total, that Raw wins over Nitro
That's
in the
right.
ratings.
For the opposite. Nitro was winning over.
Yeah, well, this is the first time. Yeah, I said it wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, did they? Okay.
In my
Yeah.
defense, it's written wrong.
Editors in the notes department, aisle 3. But anyway, yeah, we know what you mean though. 84 weeks of Bischoff mopping the
84
floor with
weeks of
Vinnie Mac
Nitro
and his
doing
crew.
the
We get it.
lead. And
Yeah.
It was definitely brought up on the documentary DVD that I have.
very fast. But sorry.
And that brings us to like the moment, and I will argue this to the death because someone almost died during this, of the Attitude Era, which is really the King of the Ring, the third ever Hell in a Cell match, Mankind and Undertaker.
This is my all-time favorite. Like, I watched this live.
Yeah.
And I watched it.
Favorite
I
match.
watched it. Like, this was my first. I think this was my first pay-per-view. Like, the first pay-per-view. Like, I'd watched Raw and I'd watched SmackDown and I'd watched all of them, but this is my first pay-per-view that I actually watched because my boyfriend and I, we actually got together like 20 some days before that. So it was the first time I had actually watched an actual pay-per-view. So I'm sitting on the couch. I don't know what we were whatever. And I'm sitting on his couch going, what the fuck is happening? Like, I could not. And I'm like, he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
I think Undertaker looking down was like, oh my God.
He's dead.
He was
He's
shaken.
dead.
He was shaken by it. He was like, wait a minute, did I really just kill this guy?
I think I cried a little. I really did. Because I really did. I love Mick Foley. Like,
And talk about
God,
that.
my witness, he is broken in
with a broken
half.
foot.
and I mean, and I know there's a whole handful of crazy that has to go into, walking in the Hell in a Cell, but to walk on top of it and then to fall through it, I think there's something not right with that man. But that's what makes him even more endearing.
Keep in mind, falling through it was not planned.
It wasn't a plan.
Yeah.
It was no.
Falling off it the first time was planned. When it broke the second time, that was not part of the plan.
I mean,
Shit
but
just
In the slightest. It's because it was so poorly constructed back then. It's not the same as what it is now.
I mean, look at the stuff though he was doing before in Japan, like the King of the Deathmatch tournament and stuff. I mean,
There's no denying he's a crazy mofo, but
Yeah.
the point,
He's willing to do whatever he physically needs to do to make that money without
If you
being a
read his
prostitute.
book- if you've read his book, this is a dude who carried a mattress out to the front yard and jumped off the roof of his house.
Yeah.
Like, there's pretty much no.
You got to be nuts.
You
You
know,
gotta be nuts
you gotta
to be in
have
this
that
business.
wit.
Guys,
You gotta
I
be
did-
crazy.
I jumped off of the couch regularly onto a 6-inch mattress that was so old it was officially 2 inches, and when you landed, you felt the concrete break your freaking fall. And that was with 3 comforters on top. Like, there was a lot of cushion, and you hit, and it's like, oh, I'm hitting concrete. You know, some of us are willing to do stage dives because it's worth a laugh. He was willing to do cage dives because it was worth the money.
Gee willikers, Thor, we are learning about all kinds of new things from you today.
When you're born broken, breaking ain't nothing. It just fixes itself later on.
I thought it was a regular thing for a kid to want to be a wrestler and jump off the couch and hit a floor or their sibling.
Hit the
I
mat.
also thought it was
Break
regular
some
shit.
chairs, maybe
Like
break the
floor
desk
is lava,
lamps.
backyard wrestling happens in my living room on a daily basis. With my
Break the
kids.
chandelier
But
while
this kid
swinging
was
off of it for
genuine,
a drop
jumped
kick.
off the roof of his fucking house. Like, if my kids are jumping off the roof of the house, I'm committing somebody.
That's only 8 to 10 feet.
Maybe
Yeah.
me. I'm the one getting distracted.
You got to be
actually.
crazy to do this stuff. You
Crazy.
got to be cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs if you want to be in this business called wrestling. That's what you got to be. You got to be nuts.
Later, like a little bit later.
We'll get there.
So yes,
Are we on 99 yet? Because some of the kids here who are really, really young, such as this guy, is waiting to dive into 99.
well, I'm looking at the wrestling.
99 was good.
I mean, 99 is when I started watching the WWF, not just WCW. Just saying.
All right, so I'm looking at the rest
Hold on.
of 99 or
Can we
98.
skip to the end of 99 when Ryan started watching wrestling? Or WWF, I should say.
There's some important stuff in 98 that I'm seeing on this list. Like the
I don't even see a
bikini-
list. I don't have a script in front of me. Where's my script, Bischoff?
I told you, send it to everybody.
Hey,
Where's
we're
the
doing this.
script, Brian? I don't
We're
have a
doing this
script.
like modern day Raw. We're doing it live. We're winging it on the fly. Come on, Ryan.
Sure.
Okay, now,
do it live. Forget it.
legitimately,
Do it
my
live.
favorite
Oh.
match.
Only
My
some of
favorite
us were cool enough to get the list.
Oh, thanks, Brian.
But I told him, look, I can only do with what I've got. You know?
Alright.
So right before this happened, like I was watching Raw and SmackDown and stuff. Like, so the day after my birthday is the entrance of my favorite wrestler in the whole world. But not like
I don't know when your birthday is, so I have no idea.
June 22nd, 1998 was the entrance of Edge with the Rude and Gangrel.
Okay, that's
So,
fair.
like, this was when he didn't talk. This was the whole, like, very,
Broody time.
Very
Christian.
dark and broody, like a lot of movies are nowadays.
pre-rated R superstar, pre-Edge and Christian, pre-everything, like pre-ladder match.
Yeah.
With the blood and the yeah, it was weird.
With the blood and the
Drinking
gangrel.
blood
He's a
out of
really
a
nice
cup.
guy.
We've established already that I'm kind of into the weird shit, so it's okay. But yes, Gangrel is.
I love the Brood. Gangrel was an awesome character, and he's an awesome dude in real life. I've gotten to perform in front of him, but I have not worked with him directly yet. Here's a little known secret about the professor that I don't advertise all that much. Anybody that I work with, and when I say work with, I had to either have been trained by them, or I've done commentary on one of their matches, or announced them to the ring. Something that I was paid to do to work with these people. If they have an action figure, I buy it, and it's kind of like my weird Dexter collection. So I've got a growing thing of action figures of people I've actually worked with, because it's kind of a cool thing, and especially guys like that you grow up watching. It's just awesome when you get those chances.
You're right.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, it revolutionized
Wrestling for you.
because
For
then
you.
the following, we went to a house show shortly after that, and I spent hours coloring the sign, which I almost think you saw, but like hours. There's a picture of me somewhere with the sign. It's really, I had a problem. I might still be in like rehab for it because he returned. So I don't know.
She was an edgehead before the edgeheads.
You think you know me. You know me. You think you know, and then the theme song
I-
kicks in.
that
That's a
was on
good
the
theme song
sign.
too.
Boom. I had the old Titantron toys, man, with the little electric things on their feet.
Yeah, with the theme music.
The theme music. Boom.
Dude, I still have WWE The Videos Ramped Up Volume 1 that has all the entrance videos on DivaDa, okay? I have that, and I have WWE The Music Volume 6, where it also has a special DVD with extended versions of the entrance videos of factions like Evolution, Shelton Benjamin, and all those other wrestlers that came in during the course of that time. So believe me, I love Titantrons, people.
That's my favorite theme song ever, is Evolution.
Oh, Line in the Sand by
that's such a Lemmy song right there, man.
It's a good hey man, a lot of factions just like the NWO. They had good theme songs, brother.
Let's see. Moving on. Before we jump to 98, or sorry, 99, we should talk about Mr. Sacco. Because
it's October, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
What a classic. Mick Foley's got that stinking smelly sock.
Hello to Mr. Sacco.
Say hello to Mr. Sacco.
How many characters did Mick Foley actually have during his time? Because
I think it was 4,
there
right?
was
it 3 or 4?
Mr. Sacco was a whole character, so it's definitely at least 4.
Okay,
yeah.
So, was it 4? Okay.
So he had 3 like gimmick personas, and he was himself too. Like he was Mick Foley, he was Mankind, Cactus Jack, and Dude Love. But when you think about Mankind, like there's really 2 distinctly different versions of Mankind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very different versions of that same character. So you could make the argument for another.
We'll just call it 5.
Plus Mr. Sacco, because that's a whole different character on its own.
So it's a handful plus a sock.
Well,
okay.
Mr. Sacco, Mick Foley, they're kind of the same guy.
Well, during that segment when he brought the clown in.
Oh my God, yeah.
And then
Yerple the clown.
Yerple.
Yeah. And then the nurse is like, "Excuse me, doctor." And then it's Steve Austin, and he hits him.
I'll take it from here, nurse.
Oh my God, that was a great segment.
That bedpan.
The bedpan noise.
Oh,
yep.
It's a good sound effect to use in motion pictures.
You want to know how to recreate that sound? Just so you're wondering at home, get a cookie tin, a metal cookie tin, wear a hat with one of the things at the top with a metal, ting it on there, and I guarantee you get both the vibration in the tin and the thunk in your skull. And it is not a fun feeling because my friend did it to me when I was 8. And might have been my first concussion.
Oh.
So
Man,
many memories that we are all sharing today. Isn't this lovely on a Saturday of Independence Day, folks?
I watched my friend powerbomb his like 4-year-old brother through his own bed, and the bed broke. And I was both scared and impressed.
wow.
Like
That
when they
sounds
broke
like
the ring, right?
I'm a big fan of that maneuver, the powerbomb, but we could talk more about that later. But my gosh, I kind of wish I was there. Even though it's a very scary thing you shouldn't be doing at home, as they like to tell us on television. Don't try this at home. Leave the danger to us.
Well, that was when they started telling us not to do it at home because
don't
every
try
kid
this
in
at
America
home,
was doing
kids.
it.
It's very dangerous, which is
We
very
are
already
doing
doing
bad
it.
stuff.
Yeah.
The Rock had already done
because
it.
kids don't know it's not the real deal. Like my kids now will wrestle and they actually are beating the shit out of one another. And I'm like I've told you this many times. That's not actually what's happening. It's like stop, like don't like actual throw punches. Like that's not what they're doing. Stop that.
You mean we
Kids
weren't
don't
supposed
get
to
it,
put
like they're gonna
our
do it.
siblings in submission holds? What?
So speaking of Mr. Sacco, I used to chase my brother around with the sock I was wearing all day. And I would throw that right down his gullet and stuff. Awful. I was a rotten bastard of a brother.
I
am the
that is
opposite
a
of what I
mandible
am today.
claw for you, man.
That is painful.
Yeah.
I got thrown in the figure 4 once, and I just stood up, and he's like, "How'd you do that?" And I punched him in the throat and rolled over. And he's like, "Oh!" He couldn't even yell because I punched him in the throat. And he was in the one where it puts all your pressure right in the middle of your shin, and it's just caving in your bone. That was my favorite memory because he dick. Same kid who hit me on the head with the metal tin actually gave me my first concussion. November 15th, The Rock wins the title.
We're almost at 99, kids. Stick
Yeah.
around.
We'll talk about one last thing. October 26th is when Nitro defeats Raw for the last time.
Yes. Which because
That's it. That's all you got to say. What happened that night on Nitro?
I'm trying to like get everything back together in my head. It was the next week, yeah? Where No, that's not right.
Well, this is October 26, 1998. Nitro defeats Raw in the ratings for the last time.
Oh, it might have been after Halloween.
I don't think it's the last time ever. I think that ended the streak of
the
83
consecutive
weeks.
streak. Yeah.
And they went back and forth for a couple of months after that until the whole butts in the seats thing happened. I think that was in January.
Yeah,
and
January
that's when I think WWF soared past them.
Yeah, January 4th, 1999. And that's when Raw took over.
Pretty much permanently.
Until the final episode of Monday Night Nitro, March 26, 2001, where everyone right here in Panama City, Florida, right behind Club La Vila, which is no longer here. R.I.P. Thank you, Hurricane Michael. It's a sarcastic thank you.
Oh, right.
Yeah, we like to party here, man. There's not a lot to do.
So just a quick question here. In December of '98, The Undertaker, of course, was doing his corporate ministry thing.
Oh boy, dark and disturbing stuff for little young me.
Was
it the corporate ministry then, or was it still just the ministry?
You know what? It might have been just the ministry where
99 is when corporate took over.
They took Steve Austin and hung him up. He had all the druids and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I was 18, but that was some scary shit.
It's very scary for a young kid to be seeing that.
Yeah. I guess I'm looking here. I said it made a lot of religious activists, outcry against it.
Yeah.
Oh, Karen, God.
Worshipping the devil on live television with Undertaker and his crew. Come on.
Like a mock crucifixion was. It was very strong imagery for sure. Like even me as a lifelong Undertaker fan, I was uneasy when he would do these
sacrifices,
these crucifix style, like hang somebody up, and I was like, I don't know if that's the move. I don't know if that's what we should be doing right now.
See, I wasn't watching at this time, so like full asterisk at the beginning, but I think that's a dope idea because, especially for Austin, it sent him even, which was not thought to be possible, even higher than he already was, because A, both guys are from Texas, and B, it made him a little bit more the savior of WWF at the time, and this subliminal, like the not subliminal, the supreme, we're gonna go with that word, guy, the man of WWF at that time. So it was kind of we're gonna kill him and then rebirth him in another week, because that's how programming works, children. Okay,
Ryan, we're in 99 now. Are you happy?
I mean, once we get towards the latter part of 99, that's when Ryan started watching. So you guys can go the first 6 or 8 months, and then we'll talk, and then I can talk later.
Well,
it's going to be a really long show.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not going to be that.
Well,
it's
look,
4th of July, guys. We're going to be here all day.
Here's a good way of speeding up some of it. So this whole early part of 98 or 99, the Mankind and the Rock feud that kind of just was meant to kind of get that through for that period of time is one of my favorite feuds and one of my favorite times, because even though a lot of people don't like when there's a lot of title changes, I really loved that there were so many title changes here, because it really, I thought, made both guys seem like very legitimate contenders for that title. And it made it interesting. It really made you didn't know who was going to keep it. And there were so many title matches. You had, when Mankind won it on Raw, then you've got The Rock winning it in the I Quit match not too long after with the pre-record. Oh, that was dirty.
20 days
they pre-recorded what he said earlier, but yeah. And then you had Halftime Heat, which was such a cool, the empty arena match during halftime of the Super Bowl. There was just a lot of really cool stuff happening for those first couple months, and it really helped build The Rock into a stronger character and kept him and Austin apart, because you didn't want to oversaturate that feud. Like they did it once before when they were for the Intercontinental title, and it was great. And they wanted to lead up to that at Mania, but you needed something to do in the meantime. And it really, really strengthened The Rock's character and really built him as a formidable opponent for Steve Austin a few months later.
Yes, while also getting Mankind and Mick Foley over as, you know, a guy who can be formidable because he won that title, albeit with a little DX interference. But then he had strong matches, and you knew he was insane because of the whole Hell in a Cell situation. So they went back and forth. What was it? I think 24th was the I Quit match, and then like 2 weeks later, maybe, was the Empty Arena match. And that Royal Rumble is the same one where McMahon won, and allowing him to taunting Steve or whatever it was. Rock taunted Steve Austin, and McMahon threw him over the top rope. So then McMahon was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go fight The Rock for the WWF title," and it was like the next night on Raw they announced that wasn't going to happen or whatever it was.
What about when Bischoff gave away the results on Nitro, which backfired on Bischoff?
What a shitty idea. You should have known that everyone already loved Mankind after the Hell in a Cell match. I mean,
yeah, and poor Tony, it made Tony Schiavone sound like such a heel. He's like, apparently over on the other channel, a competitor that used to compete here under the name of Cactus Jack is about to win that company's world championship. Yeah, that'll put a lot of butts in the seats. And then boom, people immediately went over to the other channel. Like, wait, what's going to happen? Let me go see this.
What? That guy?
Yeah, I remember.
So many dirty
I
business
wonder how he's
tricks.
going to win. I mean, when you say that, I mean, you're going to tune in because you're going to be like, Mankind won the title? What?
Yeah,
like,
how?
How?
And then it happens, and he hits you with the, "You Adrian, I did it."
So at this same time, with WCW doing stupid shit like that, you had a lot of guys that were very unhappy in WCW. And in February of '99, one of those guys that jumped ship was the Big Show, Paul White.
The Big Show.
And so just to
giant.
start out before the show, we were talking about Lita. So St. Valentine's Day Massacre happened on the 14th. That's when Paul White jumped ship. But the day before that, Lita, no, wrong year. Never mind.
Next year.
Sorry.
That would be 2000.
Fast forward a year.
Yeah.
That was a fun year.
Yeah, St. Valentine's Day Massacre was the cage match between Austin and McMahon, and that's where, you know, Paul White at the time came up through the ring, threw Austin out, but it crashed through the cage and accidentally caused Austin to win the match, which set up their Mania plans, but also introduced Paul White into the fold for the time.
Yeah.
Right. And
Rock was very angry when he showed up.
So, yeah, but, you know, you also had people, like I said, were very unhappy at WCW. And I'm sure if there was a Twitter or Facebook or whatever at that time, it would have blown up.
Just like chat room.
The entire Monday Night Wars would have blown up between, you know, those years on Twitter and Instagram or Facebook, if that was a thing.
You know, the Democrats versus Republicans was pretty chill back then, but WCW versus WWF was a hot fire mess of the internet.
I know Jericho later on had said that during this time that he was very unhappy with Bischoff and WCW and all
Pretty
that.
much everybody was.
Russo was.
They were directionless.
Yeah,
they were just directionless at the time.
Yeah,
no idea what
their formula wasn't working anymore. It was falling apart. Like, it was just all these old guys putting themselves over, and all the new good talent was not being used properly, and nobody really knew how to manage all of it. They just had endless money and could do whatever they wanted, and most of it was stupid, and fans just started losing touch with it because WWE was really going the opposite direction. They were really hitting their stride in every way, shape, and form, and all their characters. Like, it wasn't just 2 guys or 3 guys. They had, at any given time, 8 or 9 guys that are top guys in any roster on the planet that were just ready to go do something and show up. And and the Hardy Boys were just developmental guys at the time. They were just enhancement guys. They were like teenagers. So I mean, like, some of them were they hadn't even budded yet to that level where they would soon.
They were jobbers at this point because Michael Hayes brought them in 98, and it didn't. I mean, they got a little bit of airtime, but it was way more.
It was the tag team ladder
I remember
match
them
and the
before that.
Terry and
I remember they showed up in like that bright colored gear with like bricks on it, and they fought Kane in an enhancement match and a handicap match, and he just squashed the two of them. So they were around for a while.
Yeah, I think they showed up in '96 actually, in flannel gear. I think they had
so.
that in on their Hardy Boys.
They were teenagers.
They weren't Hardy Boys.
They were like 17 and 18.
They were babies,
and no one knew their age because they lied about it.
They were babies, and then they became adults a few years later.
They became older babies.
Well, whatever.
But
I know what you mean.
All of us.
Because I was reading, I was doing my homework. It said from 94 to 98, they were doing a lot of developmental work with lots of companies, like
floating around.
They're on the indie circuit, and then they debuted in WWE as the Hardy Boys with Michael Hayes as their manager.
Did they skip Ohio Valley Wrestling and go straight in?
No.
I don't know that Ohio Valley was the feeder at that time the same way it was.
And
that was a early 2000s creation.
Yeah, Smoky Mountain Wrestling for a while in the 90s was a feeder.
Yeah,
because that's where Kane came from. Because he was with Jim Cornette in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and that's where Rock came from at the beginning of his Rocky Maivia.
Jeez.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the ladder match. It might be later in the year.
It happened later.
Okay.
Yeah, which ladder match? October, I think at No Mercy.
The ladder match of 1999. Yeah.
So it says they first began teaming together in 93 as an independent promotion in North Carolina, winning the NWA 2000 Tag Team Championship in NWA 2000, and founded the Organization of Modern Extreme Grappling Arts, where they held the Omega Tag Team Championships. They were both signed contracts in WWE in 98 and were given Michael Hayes as a manager.
Fancy.
Everybody starts somewhere.
You know what else happened in 99?
Facts.
August 9, 1999. It's for those of you that enjoy our intro, then they can't see my stupid ass face when it started. I was there, baby.
I mean, for weeks they were running that whole
Chicago, Illinois.
New Millennium Countdown is what it said.
The Millennium Man for WWF.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people, according to the chats and message boards and stuff, were kind of thinking it was Jericho. I mean, there was some heavy rumors that it was Jericho because, dirt sheets were, they were kind of out there, but not like how they are now.
Yeah, they were. That was the beginning.
They were magazine based for so long, but the internet at this time was also becoming popular because by this time I also was in the chat rooms and on the internet dirt sheets, whereas I wasn't in 97 like Brian was. So I remember being smartened up to the fact that Jericho was probably going to be that guy. So I was not surprised when he debuted, but I was excited about it because I really liked him in WCW.
I didn't even know who Chris Jericho was because I wasn't watching WCW. I was watching, the only reason I watched WCW was because Brian or Mike would watch it, and he took me to live events for WCW. We saw live events, and I love DDP and that, but I wasn't watching it then, so I didn't know who Chris Jericho was. So when Chris Jericho came, and I was like, "This dude is awesome," except for when he talked, and I was like,
and it was so funny because it was during the Rock's promo when
he debuted the top guys promo. Interrupted him, and they did go back and forth. When you watch it, he still holds his own against The Rock, despite being WCW pouty face villain.
I think he's still good. His promos now are unbelievable. Jericho is as good as ever.
He is
right now today,
in my opinion, because I have to move Flair down just because It wasn't so much being a character as it was being himself, which is so easy. Trust me. But, you know, The Rock was portraying a character that was kind of different to who he really was. And Jericho was portraying a character who was also like, it's him and his ego, but he didn't actually in his day-to-day life be like, I'm the Ayatollah of rock and roll. It was a character that he was putting out. And it's, to me, it's Rock and Jericho are my top two. They grab a mic and I'm like, talk for 30 minutes, guy. Make a podcast, Chris Jericho.
He does. He has one.
Exactly.
Yeah, he does.
I could listen to both of them talk for hours, just like Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith, if he were in wrestling, number 3 promo guy. Maybe number 4, because he would go long enough to be 3 and 4.
The amount of hometown pride when Jericho first appeared, it was incredible. Like, I think everybody around that time owned a Chris Jericho T-shirt or something. They were. I saw so much of
Jericho.
Dude, his pop was so loud. I think a pop like that, the closest we've got now was when AJ Styles came out in the Royal Rumble in 2016.
Yep.
Yeah.
You mean like a debut pop?
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah, I was blown away when AJ Styles debuted. I did not know. I had been out of the dirt sheets for a while because I was like, it's just killing me. And that happened. I was like, holy fracking shirt balls. That's AJ Styles. And I watched TNA back in the mid 2000s when it was really good, when it was AJ and Abyss battling for no reason at all other than to be the best. No titles, no nothing, just bragging. Oh, man.
So during 99, is this also when Vince was working with Paul and ECW doing crossovers? Because was Raw on TNN yet?
Start later.
No,
Raw was not on
much
yet.
later.
I think they did crossovers before this.
They did. There were earlier crossovers.
6 or 7, I think.
Yeah.
But they weren't televised, though, were they?
Yeah, it was on Raw. Like they had ECW guys show up on Raw.
Oh, hold on. I can tell you. It was
like a C segment of the show. Like they didn't give it the same kind of reverence as everything else that was happening. At least not on the WWF side of things.
Yeah, no. It was before the Attitude Era had officially started, so it would have been early 97 or late 96. Because I started watching before the network was ever invented, probably 2005 or 6. Comcast had the Monday Night Wars, and they'd put on that week's episode, like a week episode of Nitro and Raw, and you could watch them back to back in a supercut. And I would watch them. And it was around this early era before NWO had really started taking off and before anything good in WWF was happening. And they had this little bit of a crossover because Austin had already been there for just long enough that he knew, oh, okay, because he got Mick Foley from there. He got Austin from there. And I want to say it was October-ish of 96 that those were taking place.
All right. I just thought, they were doing ECW still during this time. Because this was shortly before the Dudleys actually came into the company.
I think by this point, ECW had got their own foothold in the industry enough to where they weren't going back and forth. Because I got in late 99, but I'd already heard rumblings of ECW, of the barbed wire matches. And I didn't know about the explosion matches, but that was because it was in Japan. Gotta love gratuitous violence. But I'd already heard about ECW by then. So when ECW finally showed up, I was like, oh, this is who ECW is. It wasn't who ECW was.
Yeah, ECW was pretty crazy back in its day.
That's an understatement, I think.
That's painting it for children.
So
after Jericho debuted, that was when Triple H kind of got himself into the world title picture And he won that month. A couple of weeks later, 2 weeks later on Raw, actually. He was in the match at SummerSlam the night before. I think it was a triple threat match with, I think Mick Foley was involved, Triple H, and Stone Cold. Was Austin the champ then? I think so. Triple H won it the next.
Wasn't it a ladder match between the three?
No. That was the year before. That was the Highway to Hell SummerSlam.
Okay.
Because I was at the Highway to Hell SummerSlam, Madison Square Garden, but I was at they had one match, the Lion's Den match in the theater at Madison Square Garden. I was there live for that, and that was Shamrock and Owen, I think. And Dan Severn was outside, like coaching Owen Hart.
Oh, was that the one?
Shamrock and Steve Blackman.
Was that the one?
Was it Shamrock and Blackman?
Yeah, Lions Den weapons match lasted 9 minutes 6 seconds. Thank you, Wikipedia.
Wasn't there another Lions Den match though? That was the one at SummerSlam for sure.
Definitely the one at SummerSlam. I think there was another.
Okay,
but I think they called it the dog. Was it the dog pound? Maybe
that later on they did because they reinvented it for something else.
Yeah,
but I thought there were two Lions Den matches, and it was always like one of those UFC guys that was involved, which at the time was Shamrock, and then Blackman, and Dan Severn was that other guy that was in that mix.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that
we haven't mentioned Ken Shamrock. I loved Ken Shamrock in the Attitude Era. That guy was one of my favorites. I thought he was great.
That's a good.
I think they dropped the ball on Shamrock because I think he could have been champion material. I mean, he was Intercontinental champion, but I think he could have been world champion, and I think they dropped the ball on that. But I remember a segment with his sister Ryan, and they were out
with Val Venus. Yeah,
yeah, and then you could hear him when he's out in the ring. He's like, "Slap me," and she slaps him like because he didn't like cover it up or anything. And I remember that's one of the goofs that people talk about is that moment.
I don't remember this at all.
Well, and she wasn't really a wrestler either, so he probably just was trying to get her to do it, and she didn't listen the first or second time, and then he went louder, but the TV audience heard him, and that's oops.
Yeah, but yeah, I dug Shamrock, and I'm still to this day one of the guys that says that. In a legitimate fight, Shamrock takes Brock Lesnar.
I don't know about today because Shamrock's 10 years older than Brock, and Brock is still as dangerous as ever.
No, but if you put them in their primes together, Shamrock would have taken. I think.
You think so?
I think he would have made him tap.
No. If he could catch him, because you got to remember. Lesnar was like 270 as a heavyweight and could move lightning fast. The guy is a freak of nature. I don't think there's ever been another athlete quite like him in any sport. I'm a big Lesnar guy and have been forever. Probably because when I was younger, I used to get told a lot when I was in high school that I looked like a skinny little Brock Lesnar. Now I look like his fat, out of shape younger brother. But it was a sort of compliment once upon a time. Yeah.
So. Is there any other guys that we've missed in this time that we haven't mentioned? You mentioned Shamrock. Is there any other guys? I mean, there was Steve Blackman we talked that you mentioned.
You mentioned Val Venus. Val Venus, I think, was a huge part of what the Attitude Era was about, that highly sexualized nature. And you know what? We really haven't talked about the women. Sable.
Yeah. Oh, because that's coming. There's a whole lot of boob coming. Don't worry.
Wow.
But she was there already. She's like Sable and Sunny were it. They were. This is before Trish and Lita.
They weren't necessarily like wrestling though. Like, I don't remember them.
They were
Sable was.
Then.
No, Sable was women's champion, and she powerbombed Mark Merrill like a year before where we are right now. It just wasn't one of the top stories, so it's not on our notes right now.
Which is weird because I definitely remember that being like the top story. That is when everyone no longer liked Mark Moreau because the pop she got, they're like, oh, she's over more than him. Okay, got it. And no one wanted to work with him again.
They talk about she got like Austin level pops. Like when she'd come out, the pops she would get were the same as like what you'd hear from any of their top guys. Like she was such an important part of that show.
Do you know why?
People forget that.
She's got
I had a TV. I had a Sable poster in my bedroom when I was a kid at this time. So yeah, I know exactly why she got those.
I have so many bad jokes to make right
Well,
you can, whatever.
Is it sticky?
Put it in.
No.
I do remember going to 7-Eleven and picking something up that Sable was on the cover for, but that's for another show.
Oh boy!
Wow, this is that was 11.
That was the big part of the
90s,
Attitude Era
baby.
too. Her thing with Playboy was a big deal, and she was in Playboy with them 3 times.
I think
Twice by
was
herself
first,
and once with Tori Wilson.
That's
And I
an
think
important thing.
that was-
Wasn't she the first?
She was the first.
She was the first WWF woman to be like with the company and to do that.
Yeah,
And that was a big deal. It started a partnership for years and years that they had.
Who was
China.
before that? We should all ask.
Did it ever?
Who worked with a play company and worked with WWF at the same time? That's something we should talk about. Good old HBK. HB Shizzle.
Oh yeah, Playgirl. He did that.
Play
But
girl.
they never acknowledged that on WWF television. Like he did it,
They
but
did
like,
it in cheek. They did it tongue in
right.
cheek.
They never
Yeah.
outwardly said it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't
boy.
like, hey, go buy Playboy. Or in this
Right,
case, if
right.
you go buy Play. Now, if he'd have done it in 99, 2000, oh, they'd have been like,
They
"Go
would
buy-
have.
Lady, hello, ladies.
Yeah,
Do
but
you want to
it's
see
socially-
Shawn Michaels?
It's still socially acceptable for a guy to go buy Playboy, but it's less socially acceptable for us to talk about buying Playgirl.
Which is bullshit.
Hmm.
No, that-
They don't even have.
Another
Like,
conversation for another show.
yeah.
My goodness gracious!
I mean, he can take his clothes off. I don't mind.
Was that in the script? No, wait, no, it wasn't. I'm
It
sorry.
was in the script right here. August
It's in the notes
26th, he
somewhere,
takes
yeah.
his clothes off.
We had the,
But when I
almost to
say
the
the
end of
boobs are
99,
coming,
Ryan.
but when I say the boobs are coming, they talk about it later on. The boobs are coming.
Boy, I'm looking at this, and once we get to 99, it is
The
no
end.
longer.
Especially the tail end.
It's
of
like
99.
we got February, January, February, April, 3 in May, 2 in August, all five different things in September, 1 in October, 2 in November, 1 in December. Like before, it was pretty spread out. Now it's like every month something was happening.
Good thing I did my homework. I just don't have a script in front of me like Brian does, but I still remember 99 pretty well.
August 26th.
Yeah, there were just
SmackDown
lots of
appears.
good characters.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
different kind of matches
Yeah.
too.
There was so much going on.
It was a
What about,
plethora
what
of
about the
things going
tag
on.
team situation during the Attitude Era around this time in '99?
Started popping,
tag teams?
baby.
Yeah,
Oh.
It was my favorite.
Well, I felt like it was good at the beginning, and then it kind of went into a lull, maybe a little bit, and then really popped big when the Hardys and Edge and Christian and all that, and the Dudleys jumped in.
Ladder
Then there was
match.
another like
Yeah.
that really juiced that whole division. But I liked when I started watching when the Headbangers, the Disciples of Apocalypse. You'd get the Nation of Domination competing in there. The Road Warriors were there as Legion of Doom.
Mm-hmm.
Like there were a lot of good tag teams, and even Mick Foley and Terry Funk when they were Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
Like all that was cool. And then
The
there was a little
dumpster
bit of a
match.
lull for a while. Right. Yeah. I think that was at the Mania right before they
Yep.
then went to DX the next night.
Exactly. The
But I
very
think
next
there was
night
a lot
they
of
go to
stuff
DX.
happening. At that same time, other things were happening that like overshadowed the tag team.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, once Edge, Christian, and the Hardys have that match, the tag team division is in a whole different level because everyone realizes, oh, these two teams right here are on a different level because not only can they put on, solid old school wrestling matches as a tag team, but then they can go do this wildly insane, crazy crap. And we're not willing to do that because we're old or older. They weren't old. They were pushing mid-30s at that point. And you don't feel the same after 25. So
Depending on who you're talking to, that's old.
It's old to me.
Wow. Boy, do I feel old in this group. Anyway, continue.
So,
I think the question is, what didn't happen in '99?
I'm looking.
I
at
was
it.
not-
Well, we got
Yeah.
SmackDown.
SmackDown.
Oh, the birth
SmackDown
of
was in August.
Yeah.
Lay it to smack
Everybody
it
on
down.
the ground. Everybody on the ground. Great theme song, by the way.
And wasn't that an answer to Thunder? I mean,
Yeah,
wasn't that
it
the
was.
initial
It was an opportunity
reasoning
for them
for
to
it? It
distract
was an answer to
themselves from
Thunder.
Monday Night Wars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was
Right.
Response to Thunder, and it was always better than Thunder.
Hate to say it, looking
Yes.
back, yeah, it
Dude,
was.
everything was better than Thunder.
Everything
I was
was
a kid, I
better
thought it
than
was
Thunder.
great, but nowadays
Monday
it's like,
Night
yeah,
Heat was
SmackDown
better
was so
than
much
Thunder.
better than Thunder. Even though Thunder had a great theme song too.
I don't even remember the theme song. That's how boring
It's
it was.
instrumental. You can find it on YouTube's.
It's an
fun.
instrumental.
I don't remember it, but I remember like the first episode of Thunder was good because I remember it, and then I don't remember anything about Thunder after that.
It's okay. I do. That's why I'm here. I remember.
I
that
can
stuff.
hear Thunder outside right now. I don't know where you guys all live, but that's what's happening in Palm Coast.
Rather
It's
sunny.
happening in Polk City too.
Yeah, I'm looking out the window and it's rain.
It's filling up my trying to dry cooler that I'm taking tomorrow.
Bummer.
And
So
here in Canada, we're actually having a pretty good summer day.
And here in Maryland, it's also a pretty summer day. So Willow and
Yeah.
I can concur.
yeah, we're encroaching on
70
firework
degrees.
time. So
It's like 90-ish degrees here in Maryland. So.
where I live, we can go to Alabama and get those illegal fireworks, the ones that set stuff on fire. So we have like $370 something worth of illegal fireworks. I mean,
You mean fireworks?
totally legal fireworks.
You mean
Well, I thought you
standard
could just
fireworks?
use your hammer and
Oh,
make
that's
some
out.
lightning and stuff.
No. That just destroys entire world. We don't want that. We just want to celebrate all countries mattering. Oh, I said that right.
Wouldn't it be all worlds matter at that point?
All worlds do not matter because have you ever been to Muspelheim? You live in Florida. You're basically there.
So
we just
Matt,
got
is
really
this
meta.
Here in '99, you want to talk about?
Well, let's see. The major beats we've got left in '99. We said SmackDown. You had Mankind and The Rock. The Rock and Sock Connection was around this time, like a month or two later.
This is your
Instead of
life.
feuding, now
This
they
is
were
your life.
together, and we got the This Is Your Life segment, which is
In September.
fantastic.
Oh,
And
China
so that was good. And
Yeah. Mr.
China winning the
Rocco.
Intercontinental title was major.
that was
And then
this
we
year.
also get Stephanie McMahon and Triple H getting married, which
The-
Insert when
We're
Ryan
not
started
here
watching
today.
the company
we're
here.
not there today.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, you're fine. You're in
Yeah,
at this
how many
point.
times did she marry somebody though?
Once.
No. She only married. No, she
No,
married
He
once.
dated-
Married
Yeah.
once.
They gave her a date rape drug and brought her through a drive-through. Like that is what the segment was. That is
Yeah,
what
Wedding
happened.
Chapel.
He drugged her, had her passed
Mhm.
out, and went through a drive-through wedding chapel in Vegas. Like
That would not fly.
air.
Oh God, no. Would
I
not-
was
at
so
all.
Not all.
Yeah, that's when I started watching the company known as WWF. Because when that wedding happened, I thought, okay, this is a good show. Stephanie and Tess getting married, this is great. It's lovely. I love happy endings. And then all of a sudden, this dude with some weird leather jacket walks out, interrupts a very important ceremony, and says, "Wait a minute, you said no family member or anybody that wasn't invited should get involved in this, but I really felt that you should take a look at this." And when I see the tape, I'm like, this is not right, man. This guy needs to be arrested, thrown in jail, put in the divorce
he
papers,
roofied her.
make Stephanie a free woman, and get this guy out of the company, because what he did is wrong beyond so many words. I was like,
Oh.
Vince, if you don't fire this guy, I'm gonna be upset. Like, I'll be
Can you
pissed.
imagine if they aired that segment today?
Oh,
Oh,
no.
Oh,
You can never get away with it.
Would
You
not
can never
happen.
get away with it.
at all.
cancel
But we look back at
WWE.
it now through the lens
It's like
of
such
today.
inappropriate content. It's not even funny. But yeah, that's when I started watching the company.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this is serious stuff, man. Someone needs to pay for this. And then Vince says, all right, I'll take you on in a match in Armageddon. If you win, you get a title match. If I win, just we'll sign these divorce papers or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately Vince lost because he's 530 years old going up against a 25-year-old jacked up dude in Fort Lauderdale, and he gets the mop the floor with him. And then
Turned out
Stephanie
that Stephanie was in on it.
Yeah, and then Stephanie betrays her father, hugs Helmsley at the end, and I was like JR, I'm like, King, what is this? For the love of God. I mean, what is this? Like, I was freaking the hell. I was like, Stephanie, how dare you? Why, Stephanie? Why? And then the next night in Tampa, we figured out why. I'm like, no wonder you're the most dysfunctional family on TV. You're willing to put everybody through heck just to boost ratings, Vince. Great parenthood. No. Worst father ever. Like, seriously, I was so mad. I was like, you cannot put your kids through this. I don't care if it's a character or not. It's wrong beyond measure, but they did it anyway. And some of it was entertaining.
I'm surprised you went along with it, though.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah, Vince had conversations, I'm sure, ahead of time saying, hey, we're going to do this angle. Are you willing to go through with it? And they're like, yeah, sure. And I'm like, if I were in those shoes, I would have said, heck no, Dad. I don't want to be on TV like this. No. But the kids are willing to do it anyway.
So what about November 14th, 99?
Kurt Angle?
Oh, yeah. Making his debut.
It's Survivor Series?
3 eyes, baby. I don't think they premiered here.
Integrity, and intelligence. But then there was a fourth eye, as the fans said in the audience, and it's called infidelity, by going after Stephanie McMahon Helmsley in 2000.
What a storyline. I love that storyline so much. And
some of that stuff I thought was so real. I was like, this cannot be happening on national TV. But I was so sucked in by it. I was like, this is so repulsive. But yet I want to see if Kurt Angle's going to get Stephanie away from that horrible human being known as Triple H. And then one thing leads to another. And we had some great matches in 2000, which we'll go into later. But man, 99 and 2000, I was on board for one of the wildest rides I've ever been on in the history of professional wrestling. I'll tell you.
That was a good time.
And, we forgot to mention, and I'm pretty sure it already had happened, but the Steve Austin beer truck.
Oh, my God.
Which, for some reason, fans still call that Raw's best moment, and I would disagree with that wholeheartedly.
It's definitely up there, but
it's not the best, though.
I don't think it is
the best, but it's a good moment.
For me, the rock line is the best.
Filling his car with cement was better.
That was
using the monster truck.
I like the Zamboni. I like when he drove the Zamboni and ran up and jumped over the guards and hit McMahon in the middle of the ring. And
I like that one more
the King of the Ring.
Yeah, I like that one.
I mean, they were all good. He came out in monster truck. Just what's he going to drive next? Was what they were doing.
Well, SmackDown, he drove a crane.
Yep.
That was what I think that's the first SmackDown I actually ever watched live, and he dropped the crane
on the DX Express.
on the DX Express, and it exploded. And
so happy.
Like the scene before that, they uncover a rattlesnake, and I flew across the room because I have this staunch ophidiophobia, and I lost it, and I watched from behind the couch. I was like, "What's happening now?" Ooh, explosion!
That was great. I was happy when that happened because they were playing their characters. That DX was their heels, and I hated them so much. I wanted them to get their comeuppance, and who better to do it than my boy The Rock? He's my number one. And then the Texas Rattlesnake coming in from behind, dropping some stuff on the DX Express. I'm like, man, we are not gonna have another DX night, as Vince likes to say.
Yeah. And speaking of November 14th, that was when Austin got ran down and had to go off the shelf for 10 months.
Yep. Then he comes back in September on Raw on State College, PA.
I did it for The Rock.
Oh, man, when Rock made fun of all the superstars, including Rikishi, for that, that is some of the best promos I've ever seen on television. I did it for The Rock. I can't even do it.
Easily top 5 promos ever.
I did. I did it for the people.
When he made fun of people, I used to download his promos and listen to them on I would burn them onto CDs so I could listen to them while working for my father when I was 13. My name is Kane. I am a Rudy Poo. I love
in 99 he cut a promo on Kane when he was in the corporation, and he says, on top of all that, look at this guy, he's 7 feet, pure idiot, you put his brain in a parakeet, zing, fly backwards.
Can we talk about the promo that DX did on the Nation or Domination?
Yes. Oh my God.
Rock still did it better though, but okay.
I'm surprised it's gotten no talk lately. with everything happening today, especially in looking at wrestling under the lens that we are now.
Yeah, they got away with a lot of
They were in
stuff.
blackface.
I think the
But
only
it was
reason
wildly entertaining for the time.
I think the only reason they got away with it is because
Vince McMahon said
they
so.
did that all the time to everyone. That I don't think that was their first time, was it? No, it wasn't.
It was.
It was.
That was the first
Yeah,
time.
that was their first time.
They did it
But-
afterwards.
They did it a lot afterwards,
And
and
then-
I think that's the only reason it's not being brought back up is because of that. And the fact of how they made fun of Owen Hart, I think was worse than everybody else. Like I felt like they paid good homage to the characters. And then Owen Hart, they really, really shit on Owen Hart and how they portrayed him with just like the bad caution tape and him running sideways. Who played him? Was it Mr.
Prosthetic?
Was that Billy
No, it was
Gunn
a
that played him?
comedian. It was a comedian played him named Jason Sensation because he did a lot of really good wrestling impersonations.
Okay.
And his Owen Hart was pretty spot on.
Wow, that's why they
So
made
many
fun of
good
him the
promos.
most.
Oh man, you
It's one
brought
of my
up
favorite
promos.
things about wrestling are the promos. They're some of the best things.
You don't see as many of them today either.
No, you
And
don't.
That's
But when I was,
unfortunate
wa-
because
when I
that's
was
why
watching
the
him in
product
99
weaker,
and
I
2000, I mean, when The Rock cuts in on Stephanie McMahon Helmsley and the McMahon Helmsley are like, anytime they got like shaded, whether it be Jericho talking about Stephanie McMahon's job on her chest, I mean, just
Job.
yeah, I was like, somebody is throwing shade at these people, and I'm
You
so
got two
happy they're
flotation
doing it.
devices.
Because honestly, any of those guys who cut shade on McMahon Helmsley people, I was like, you're my best friends, like ever. Because I hate those dudes. I hate them so much.
Brian,
The Rock was so good at it.
promos, Brian, promos.
promo. So I just want to say one thing here. This is for Ryan. December 12th, 1999 at Armageddon.
Fort Lauderdale,
I believe at the time she was involved with Jared King Lawler,
Yes.
Oh, the cat, you mean?
the cat.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
cat. Yeah.
She wins the WWF Women's Championship, drops her top to expose her breast on live TV, making the first incident of intentional nudity in WWF TV.
That should be
First incident of
Intentional.
intentional.
Yeah,
Alleged first incident.
That spot with Jacqueline from the British pay-per-view like 2 years before, I think was
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, Ryan, if you got all those videos, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
What was that? What was the UK?
I remember
did-
renting it
called?
just because I was interested in the pay-per-view, and then
Yeah.
that was on there, and I was like,
It was.
"What the
I did.
hell just happened?"
I'll admit, I did watch the Armageddon 99 VHS tape, folks. I'm not going to lie. I did.
Is there a hole in it?
No, I watched the entire pay-per-view, not just because of the cat match, but everything that happened in between.
I have my moments.
Even though I already knew the ending of it.
That was good.
So that's
Ooh.
pretty much what happened in '99. Now we enter 2000, and like I said,
McMahon-Helmsley
a lot of people are unhappy with WCW. So on January 31st, you get a group of ex-WCW wrestlers.
Yes.
The Radicals.
I remember this episode so hard, and I don't know what. All I remember is I remember them premiering and going, "Those are pretty cool guys," and then they all turned out to be, except Perry Saturn. Sorry, Perry. Major stars in the company. I mean, Dean Malenko
I
probably
like
not a
Perry
major
Saturn.
star.
I hate that he didn't.
They turned him into the mop guy.
I know, but he
Which
was
is-
man when he was in the
Moppy.
flock with Raven, he was cool.
Oh, yeah.
And his
He was-
submission, the rings of Saturn, nobody else
Mhm.
ever did that. It was
Yeah, he was
cool.
the enforcer of Raven's flock.
Dude,
Yeah.
if
He
you want
was
to look
good.
at
They just
Perry
gave him-
Saturn, I mean, even before WCW, look at his ECW days. I mean, the dude was legit
Yeah.
in the ring, and
Rings of Saturn.
Yeah.
He was legit in the ring, and they couldn't figure out a way to make him legit on the mic. So
And
they
then they
gave
just
him a
gave him a
mop
mop.
wife.
Yeah.
They
And
mopped
Terry
his
Brown
wife up.
as a manager.
So, this January 31st episode with the Radicals, go back and look at how awful all four of these guys' shirts are. They're wearing the stupidest outfits you've ever
I just
seen.
watched that.
I swear.
Yeah.
Just go back and you're like, what the hell are they wearing? It's the stupidest shit ever. But they're wearing it.
And the
Isn't
80s
Eddie
was
wearing
better with
flannel?
all the diamonds.
Yeah. It's bad. It is
And Eddie's arm
really
is in a
bad.
sling, too.
Oh, he was in
Yeah.
a sling.
His arm was in a sling, and he was kicking Mick Foley while he was down or something. It's just,
And it was
Kinda
funny
silly,
because
yeah.
Didn't Benoit win the WCW World Championship
Yeah,
the
like
night
the
before?
night before or 2 weeks before, yeah.
No, I think it was the night before, and
Okay,
then
it
he
was
just
the night
dropped
before.
it and just went straight over.
Yep.
Well, no,
But it was a super quick turnaround.
it said this was the last act of WCW wrestlers that came over because they were on WCW a week earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Nitro
Or
and sold out the
it says a
pay-per-view.
week earlier or the same night. Yeah, there was a pay-per-view.
Sold out. Yeah.
Benoit won it after coming off the cage with the headbutt, and I think they put the belt on him to try and get him to stay, and he won it and was like, "Thanks, no, I'm not staying," and then he left, and that was it.
And then Monday Night Raw comes around. And the
Yeah, this
Radicals
is
debut, King.
I just looked up. I just looked it up, and it's oh my god, Perry Saturn's shirt. The only one who doesn't look dumb is Eddie.
Oh no,
He's
so
wearing all black. Oh no,
Mhm.
and Dean. Well, Dean looks like an old man in a turtleneck, so there's that. But
Wasn't
Eddie,
he already old? No.
he was. He was.
I mean, wasn't he pushing like 45, 50
Dean,
years old when he debuted?
Dean
on Raw or
was
something?
the oldest of that group for sure, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it was the New Age Outlaws versus Steve Blackman and Al Snow.
There's
Head
an odd
Cheese.
tag team for you.
Ed Cheese was their tag team name.
Ed Cheese, yeah.
Yeah,
And hey, a few months later, they competed at WrestleMania against T and A. But that stands for Test and Albert, not what you other kids may be thinking at home.
Right.
No, it was TNA, not T
Right.
and. Yeah,
Sure.
With Trish Stratus as the valet.
yeah,
The
because
very
of T
beautiful,
and A.
drop
Sorry.
dead gorgeous Trish Stratus as the manager. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she looks better now, and I'm probably the only person that says
No.
that.
No.
I
Nope.
think so.
Nope.
She does yoga.
You
She
know
also she's
For the
also
last
she's
20
more
years,
toned.
She's looked beautiful.
She's
let's just
more
put it that way.
toned. She's a lot more tan, which for whatever reason bothers the hell out of me. But like as an athlete, I think she's more in shape now than she ever has been.
I respect that. I get
I'm
that.
That
Former
may be-
personal trainer, and I'm obsessive about abs because
She's
I don't
probably
got them.
probably more functionally. Yeah, she's probably more functionally built now, whereas it might have been more fashion influenced at the time.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Yeah,
Thank you,
wearing
Blaine.
those jackets and those cowboy hats on Sunday Night Heat television, boy.
I think after this episode, I'm gonna have to post that picture of you from a few years back with that
Or them.
Nash store.
Do it.
As the Emperor would say.
Yes. This led us to the Fatal 4-Way at Mania 2000.
That's right.
WrestleMania
was-
16 in Anaheim.
That was a mediocre match.
Well, when you have the most
Yeah.
dysfunctional family on TV at ringside trying to ruin the match at every possible turn, which doesn't do good for me or the ratings, that's what's going to land you a bad match. You should have left the McMahons in the backstage area where they belong and let the athletes compete in the ring.
Yeah,
you
what
know,
he said.
that same night, the match of the night was the Hardys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudley Boys.
Oh,
That-
tag team
yep,
ladder match. Yeah.
That's I was trying to remember if that was the same one because I know. Oh yeah, this was 16.
It
I
was
always
a triangle
forget.
ladder match.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
this was
called
my
it
first
WrestleMania
WrestleMania that I ever was a part of watching WWF, and so I always get really confused if this was like what WrestleMania this one was because it was just dubbed WrestleMania 2000, and it messed with my head. But yeah, this was the triple threat ladder match that led to the birth of TLC mere 6 months. No,
Months later, yeah.
a month
Summer,
later. Yeah,
right?
it was SummerSlam.
SummerSlam,
believe.
that's right. Tables, ladders, and chairs
Yeah.
match. Not tenderness,
So-
love, and care, but tables, ladders, and chairs.
4 months. It was 4 months. April to August.
Boy,
Mhm.
those were some of the best matches in wrestling. To me.
Those. My
They're
favorite
crazy.
match.
They're guys
My favorite match
jumping
of all
off
time.
ladders and all this other stuff, and it's like I've never seen this before.
TLC WrestleMania 17 is still probably my favorite match of all time.
Lita has gone on record by saying that's like her favorite match she's ever either appeared in or competed in. That was her favorite match.
It was so good. They told a story. It's so much shorter than you remember it being, and just
When
the spear, like
Mm.
the failed catwalking the ladders, then he just leaps and is able to grab them. Then they pull like the way they fix that mess up is very cleanly done just to get Edge to hit the spear. And that's my moment. That's my favorite WrestleMania moment, was that spear.
The stunts for
down,
WWE became so much better after 2000, and like Lita's stunts were amazing. The Hardy Boys, their stunts, like I don't know. I don't know who the stunt coordinator was around that time, but they need to be paid double.
It was Jeff Hardy was just crazy, but
yeah, they were all crazy. That helps.
Yep.
Well, it's because it's those guys, they wanted to do it. Like they could and would bump like that. And so they found new ways of challenging it. And it really was a stylistic difference from everybody else. There are more guys like that now because more guys have been influenced by them. But they were really pioneers of it at the time, at least on the mainstream stage in the WWE. And it showed, and fans ate it up. I mean, here we are very excitedly talking about it some 20 years later.
Yeah, and the wrestling term is spots.
First of all, it shouldn't be 20 years later.
Yeah,
but it is. Yeah,
but it is.
We're not as. I mean, we're still young. We're very young. It's been a while. But yeah, those are some crazy matches, and then to see them say we did it all for the fans because we wanted to give them something to remember before they left the arena that night. Like that's incredible. Like when I hear that, it's like, geez, these guys. They just care. They really care. They love it to pieces, to the point where they're willing to break their backs, twist their ankles, break legs. I mean, Jeff Hardy, when he dives off a swanton off a 20-foot ladder onto the Dudleys, or jumping off a ladder in another set of tables, I mean, it's insane. Like, why would you do that? He's like, I do it for the fans. I'm like, that's nuts. But as the gift says, I appreciate you. You know, it's insanity.
Well, these were huge things that everybody liked. And then I don't know where it was. I forget where it is in history, but the hardcore division at the time. And then the 24/7 was right around this time.
Crash Holly.
And I know that's not on here, but that gave a lot of like lower mid-card guys opportunities to shine. I mean, it reinvigorated Bob Holly's career.
Oh, my God.
It made him a cool Crash Holly, who they put with him, was great. It elevated Molly in the women's division because they put her with them. You had all kinds of other guys that got a chance to do things and have fun with it. And that, like, there's some really great clips of the 24/7 rule of like Gerald Briscoe covering Crash Holly with one finger while he's sleeping. Yeah. And the referee is, and Briscoe wins and he goes, like, it's so funny. It's done so well. And they don't really do the same thing. 24/7 title the way that they should, but it was a cool thing for sure that made the Attitude Era a lot of fun.
And it brought back Patterson for a few spots, and like all the old time they were producers at that point, but it just brought back all these old hats who were able to get a little bit of just a little bit of,
you know what's wild though?
Publicity.
Go look at how old they were when this happened.
Yeah, they
are younger than some of the guys that are actively working now, but they looked old as to be. Like they're like maybe early 50s, late 40s, and you've got like the Undertaker who stopped at 56.
Yeah,
and Patterson and Briscoe were younger, but they just seemed so much older.
It was the times.
Did they still have the European title going on at this time?
Yes.
Yeah, it was still going.
It was still there.
Snow was the European champion, and then William Regal, that disingenuous dude, took it from him. So that
lasted until after the invasion, I believe, when they merged it. I think RVD merged them.
Oh, I think that's actually a good point. It's funny to see the evolution
the Intercontinental title. Like they merged the European and the Intercontinental, because then they had 2 tag team titles and they couldn't handle it. They had those. They had the Cruiserweight. They wanted the Cruiserweight to come up and all the fun stuff. That's where my memory is less foggy.
It's crazy to see some of these wrestlers, how they've evolved over time, especially going back to 99 to 2000 with Molly Holly was known as Mona / Miss Madness of 99 in WCW, being a part of Macho Man's entourage, jumps ship over to the WWF, becomes Molly Holly, then she does Mighty Molly, and then she becomes like the nasty, the heel version of Molly Holly. And it's just,
that was my favorite version.
That was insane. Like to see her evolve like that. Like I loved her to pieces as a Molly, I'll say this to you. I really liked you as a blonde. I really did. I mean, when you went brunette, I don't know if I can get used to that, Molly, but you know what? You
We're
did what was best
different.
for you. I respect that. And she still managed to kick tail and take names with the brunette hair. So, Molly Holly, I respect you for that.
Is that you're talking about when Molly Holly joined? She was part of Right to Censor with Stevie Richards?
No,
right?
that was Ivory.
That
Well,
was
she, Ivory was.
Ivory was part of
okay.
RTC, but Molly Holly really evolved during this period of time between 2000 and 2001.
Yeah.
I mean, heck, she was dating Spike Dudley in 2001. It was
Oh my
crazy.
God.
That was a
That's
great
right.
tenderness love story that unfortunately didn't end too well. I mean, I would have loved to have seen them gotten hitched in real life because they look so ridiculously good looking together on TV.
So ridiculously hey man, Bill, they look so ridiculously good looking together on TV.
They do. Spike and Molly, that storyline on Raw and SmackDown, that was great.
That was adorable.
It was very adorable. I was like young love
To me,
blossoming
that's-
in the midst of a violent company.
I
have
stopped
a
watching
great-
around.
I have a great.
01 was
Really?
when I stopped watching for a couple years. Yeah.
I stopped in about 2002-ish. I don't remember when it really was that I stopped watching, but I got out of it. It might have even been 3, but maybe 4. No, I remember watching Kurt Angle versus John Cena. I remember when that actually happened. I remember Brock Lesnar for a bit, and then I just stopped watching. I was about 13. I was before 13, maybe 13. So yeah, been about 04-ish. And then I came back a couple years later, and it was dynamically 100% different show.
Yeah. So
Speaking of evolutions of characters, though, we had the Undertaker in May of that year. That's when he became the American Badass. That's one of those standout moments that year for me because I remember that very well.
Judgment Day.
Everything else
well.
gelled together.
That was my first actual introduction to the Undertaker. Like I knew who the Undertaker was. I actually knew him more from his early 90s stuff because I think I'm guessing my dad was watching some pay-per-views when we had cable, and I have memories from when I was 6 months old. So there's that. But I remember him like, oh, okay, yeah, that's the Undertaker. And then I saw him in like someone's like, oh, this is what the Undertaker looks like now. And I'm like, that's weird. And then he came out as American Badass. I'm like, now that's the Undertaker.
Well, I think the change was kind of like how it was with Hogan and all that, was about changing the character before it got stale.
Yep.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. And it was a
loved him
good
as
move.
American Badass.
Same.
Loved it.
It still worked.
I mean, he comes out with a bike. He comes out to Kid Rock or what was the other one? Limp Bizkit.
Limp
I mean, when you come
Bizkit.
out to music like that and you say, "This is my yard,"
Oh
and
yeah.
I'm the big dog that runs that yard. I mean,
I'll make
if you
you
try
famous.
me, I'll make you famous. I mean, say that, and if you want to beat someone's ash, feel free, Undertaker, because whoever you beat, you're gonna win wholeheartedly. Because when you do a choke slam and a tombstone or a last ride, you're done. You're done. I didn't think anyone could perfect the jackknife powerbomb because of Kevin Nash. I'm for life, brother. But when Undertaker lifts you 10 more feet up in the air like this and just whams you, you're not getting up after that, period. You're going to be out like a light. Just saying.
You know what I like about this time is also a lot of the guys were calling stuff on the fly, which doesn't happen much anymore.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot more improvisation versus what it has evolved into, which is just a lot of pre-worked out, you know, just both in the ring and in the promos. Like back then, there was a lot more leeway. I think, at least in terms of promos, AEW right now has a lot more freedom of the way that they talk, and it shows in the kinds of promos that you hear on their show. But I mean, the Attitude Era was really known for that, and yeah, I think this was the last year that we saw a really strong year within the Attitude Era, because by March of 2001, I think the Attitude Era is over. That's when Nitro ended. I think when Nitro ended, that was it. That's the end of the Attitude Era.
Like everyone calls WrestleMania 17 when Austin gets the help of Vince McMahon to win that title. That's the end of the Attitude Era. And I guess if you had to call a hard stamp, I would call WrestleMania 17, because really that TLC match is, as I said, it's my favorite. It's probably my favorite match of all time. And that is like the creme de la creme of that entire show. Not the gimmick Royal Rumble, not Austin versus Rock. It was the TLC ladder match, and everything on that card was just second fiddle. And at that point in time, when your top draw is no longer a top draw, that it changes your entire future. And from that point forward, what was it? 2000 and no, this was the same evolution. Invasion was
01.
Yeah.
01.
Yeah.
And that is as soon as Invasion ended, which was just kind of like a good holdover. Then you get reinventions of Edge, of Christian. Jericho cuts his hair.
Jericho.
You get John Cena. Brock Lesnar comes in. And as soon as all that happens, it's just boom. It's a fire.
Batista, Shelton Benjamin. And that's the Ruthless Aggression era.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ruthless Aggression era. And that's
Which
that.
might
But there's that,
be
little,
our
that
sequel.
interim. Yes, there's that little interim in between, like because Monday Nitro ended in March of 2001. A week later was Mania 17.
Yeah,
and then you had the Invasion storyline, and in the Invasion storyline, that's when I stopped watching. It wasn't like a conscious decision. I think that was when I was going to high school, and I had a lot more things going on. And it just didn't feel as important to me. I still read the dirt sheets, but I stopped watching actively. And that was the end of the Attitude Era to me. It was not must-see television the way it was from that 97, 98, 99, and into 2000.
There was
01.
some hits, though, in that time frame, like Steve Austin and Booker T. In the
There was great stuff. Yeah, I love going back. I love that. It was really great.
Yeah, there's a lot of good segments,
Yeah.
but overall, it was
they dropped the ball in the Invasion.
I still like the Invasion stuff, but that's probably because I haven't gone back to rewatch it.
Yeah, I mean, I like it too.
Who invaded? Booker T is the only guy that invaded that mattered.
Yeah.
The rest of them were all C-listers and that wound up doing nothing. And it's not an insult to those guys. That's just how they were built, how they were positioned. All the other guys had guaranteed contracts for a few more years. No Sting, no Goldberg, no Diamond Dallas Page. None of those guys came over. Nobody that you wanted to see actually in the mix
there
with everyone. So it didn't matter. It wasn't important.
The best part about the Invasion was ECW because they brought in the names that you knew of. Yeah. And they had a couple really once they started having this jumping ship back and forth, that's when it really got good because then it was just like, that showed, like a revolutionary war situation. Who's going to win? I'm going to go on the side that I think's going to win because I'm pissed off at this guy, Benedict Arnold. I'm looking at you. So it lent itself really well to the storyline. But really it was ECW was the standout of that whole time. That's where we got Dreamer. I think Sabu was there for a couple episodes and then they're like, yeah. And really that was the explosion of RVD. He was there, I think, in 2001, but once the Invasion stuff happened and he went back to ECW for however long that was when RVD became the big deal that he was, the big effing deal, excuse me.
And ECW folded into WWF. Well, at that point, it would have been WWE because they were doing the Get the F Out.
Yeah, great marketing, people.
Yeah, I mean, all that is post-Attitude. I mean, that's all
so cheesy.
That weird period and then Ruthless Aggression, that it all, and I've gone back and followed it. And I started watching again in late 04, like when I got to college and I was in a dorm room and I no longer had a million things to do is when like I saw kind of the rise of John Cena, like right before he won the title. That's when I started watching again. And I've liked it. And there's been a lot of things that's been great. But that Attitude Era, the whole topic that we're here today, like you could just hear the way that we've spent these last 2 hours and 40-something minutes.
3 hours. This is almost going to be longer than Lord of the Rings film, people.
We missed so many things. Like
we missed
not that we need so much.
I mean, there is so much in this time that there was no way that we were going to get to everything.
Not unless we were live on pay-per-view.
Sexual chocolate. Okay. May Young's sun hand.
I've ever seen in television.
That was
terrible.
Terrible. Can we talk about how he came back and he's like, "Hi, Mom," and he's in a hand costume, like
a Raw reunion years later. Yeah,
that
was
like
fun.
5 years ago, maybe maybe longer. Oh my
Yeah.
god, that was glorious. Val Venus getting his penis chopped off. XTV, or was it? Yeah, it was
Yeah,
No,
XTV.
GTV.
Yeah,
GTV,
GTV.
which never was resolved ever.
Yeah, that never. We don't.
I'm
even know
still
what that
upset
was.
about that. I wanted to know what was happening. That was.
What does GTV stand for anyway? Godfather
That's
Television,
why-
because Godfather.
Oh, no.
Oh.
They never resolved it.
That
people
is
thought it was
so
gold.
much better than they had. They had no idea. That's way better than what they had as an idea.
There was a few rumors on who it was supposed to be, but it never. Yeah, it went
They
away.
dropped it.
So weird.
The Big Show's shirt where it points down to his
Big all
feet,
over.
his feet. That's my favorite. That's one of my favorite segments. Like, hey Trish, hey, what's up, Big Show? You like my shirt? Yeah, it's pointing to your. Yeah, what's the Big Show pointing to? Your feet. Yeah, my feet. I wanted that shirt just because of that joke.
Gee, willikers.
My favorite GTV segment was when there was a GTV there was a camera up in the corner of the men's bathroom, and it's Val Venus and the Big Show in the urinals next to each other. And Val Venus looks over at the Big Show and starts laughing. He goes, "They call you the Big Show?" And he smashes him in the wall while he's taking a leak, and then they get into a feud that night. That's my I just thought that was so funny.
That is.
They had fun with it, but they never resolved what it was all about.
Yeah. And then you mentioned earlier TNA, which was Tess and Albert.
Yeah.
Which amazing athletes and performers. Like,
Yeah. And they were
And
managed by a
introduced
very
us to,
beautiful
Trish
and talented
Yeah.
athlete.
nobody. I don't think anyone remembers them like that stable for anything other than Trish Stratus.
Yeah.
Well, she is kind of beautiful.
She's kind of the biggest star out of all of them. So there's that.
You remember the segment that she had with Vince?
Yes.
There's a lot of things she did with Vince, and I'm not too happy about. They shouldn't have done. There's a lot. Like if I were
There's
in
a lot
creative
of-
control as
yeah.
a young 14-year-old boy, I still would have had the sense to say, Vince, we're not going to do this. Trish is better than this. You should be better than this as an adult, but clearly you're not. But Trish is better than this, but you're going to make her do it anyway? Yeah,
Made her
great. That's
bark
great
like a
managing,
dog.
Vince. It's so bad.
It
It's
was-
so wrong on so many levels.
Yeah.
I honestly feel like they tried very hard to humiliate as many people as they could during that time, and they really didn't care, and it made the audience uncomfortable, and that's why a lot of people left and stopped watching.
Yeah.
Was because of that.
They definitely, because they would wait till someone's established just enough before they try and bury them, which is a classic WWE move. So they, especially with Trish Stratus, there's another one. What was it? Oh, speaking of Trish Stratus, excuse me, when Stephanie and Triple H were feuding back and forth, and it was right after he'd returned and Jericho was making his play. I think this is actually 2000, but he's teaching Trish how to get out of an armbar, and Steph walks in.
He's got her at hammerlock, and she bends over, and
and she's bent over. He's like, no, it's not what it looks like. No, he was teaching me how to get out of an armbar, and then they get in that fight, and then Triple H is just sitting there going, no, don't.
I just watched that segment, actually. This is your blank fault. And then he just bangs the lamp or destroys the lamp. And Stephanie's like, I can't believe you. I can't believe you. I'm like, man, talk about overacting, Steph. But okay, I'll run with it.
You know why it worked? Because he's that damn good.
Which,
What
little part of me
about-
wanted that t-shirt.
Oh my God.
We
There was a little part of me that
forgot
wanted
about-
that t-shirt. Just so I can rub it in my friends' faces at school. You know why I'm one of the best students in this school? Because I am that damn good. I would have yelled in that one kid's face. I would have been like, I am the game. Like, I am the game.
What about what I think is probably the best segment on Raw between Austin and McMahon when he had the gun
Yes.
and McMahon was
Bang,
crying and
yeah.
it says bang and he makes McMahon pee his pants.
I was
McMahon
thinking about
316 means I just piss my pants.
that. I was thinking about that earlier when we were talking about Brian Pillman and the gun. I was like, man, Vince peed his pants that one time.
Oh,
That was
Benny
some-
Mac.
That was some dark Joker gimmick
Yeah, it
right there
was.
that they used, and I'm such a fan of that segment because bang.
So, Matt, before we end this show, I'd like to ask you, since you are in the industry and this is where you fell in love with wrestling, what different aspects of this Attitude Era did you take and bring to your skill set in the industry?
I mean, my love for it really comes from this time more than any other. I mean, I've been influenced by all of it, and I've watched for a long time with only a couple of years gap. But I think for me, the biggest thing in terms of just actual practices of what I saw at that time versus what we see now in the industry as I'm in it, and it's a little bit different on the indies where I operate, but just there was a bit more realism in the sense of how people were asked to do promos. I think promos in wrestling now are really a lost art for the most part overall, especially the WWE. You can tell it's very scripted. It's very put on it, which I understand. But you can tell when someone feels more comfortable and sounds more genuine. And those types of promos really resonate more with an audience. And they were the reason why so many people were able to get over so successfully, why you have so many fond memories of so many people during the Attitude Era. You know, The Rock was The Rock. Austin was Austin. And they might have had some bullet points, but it was them coming across and coming through in their words when they would speak in front of the audience. You don't see that as much now. And so for me, whenever I do something, like even some of the promos and things that I write, like I don't rehearse it too much. I need to know my major beats, but I want it to sound real and authentic because there's so much more believability that comes across. And even in a position like mine as an announcer or commentator, you can tell when somebody just sounds canned and they don't know what they're doing, or they're just saying what other people have told them to say versus when they're just good at their job and you're getting their actual voice coming across. And I think that's the biggest thing from the Attitude Era that we don't see as much of, that I try my hardest to bring out in the types of work that I do and in the feedback that I'm able to give some of the folks that work with me.
Nice. Today was a great show. I want to do something real fun real quick here. If there's someone in today's world of wrestling, if you took them where they are in their prime or even a few years back, who would you throw into the Attitude Era?
I would love to see Bray Wyatt in the Attitude Era. I think he's the guy that gets it done right now and sounds real. Even though he's a character, he sounds real and would fit so well with that mix of guys.
Thor?
You know, I'd love. I don't know how well he'd do, but I'd actually love to see Roman Reigns in the Attitude Era just to be himself, because you can tell he is not himself. When he came back from leukemia, that's about the closest he's been to his actual personality, and it showed night and day. And I would really enjoy seeing what he did. I'd also love to see what John Cena would have done in the Attitude Era, considering what he did as the heel version of Cena. He pushed some boundaries, and I'd like to see both of those guys in the Attitude Era, just as they bring some.
Cena is underrated.
Stuff.
Underrated. He gets a lot of heat that he doesn't deserve. He was better than we remember him being, for sure.
Yes, I concur. I was one of those haters too. Proud to admit.
Oh,
I think you get a lot of hate when you are good, though.
Yeah,
Like-
he was just that good that you wanted to hate him.
You know, real quick, because I know and I got to get to my nephew's birthday party. I'm like an hour late, but
Wow.
real quick, Cena, like I got sour on Cena too for a while. I was just so sick of the same thing because it really happened for a long time.
Mhm.
But I became a father in 2011, late 2011, 2012. And when you start thinking about things in terms of what your kids are watching and who you want them to look up to and who you want them to emulate, that's when I understood John Cena's gimmick and his whole never give up and all the color stuff. Like, yes, it's marketing, and I understand that too from a business sense in that time. But I still maintain that John Cena, as a guy, as a character, they didn't change him because he was so important to what kids should be watching. I think he's one of the few athletes, and you look at that guy and you think about his work ethic, what he's done for other people. how many records he's broken, with how many wishes he's granted for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. The guy is selfless and has a tireless work ethic and is really good at everything that he does. That's the kind of guy you want your kid to look up to. So that for me is when I was like, I now understand why John Cena isn't changing and hasn't changed, and he shouldn't, because he really is so important to those kids that are watching, so that they have someone to look up to that's important.
I totally agree.
Absolutely.
And I'm just going to throw this out here. The person that I would take out of this era is AJ Styles.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That AJ Styles versus Shawn Michaels in their prime.
Money. That's money right there.
Yeah.
Just take my firstborn while you're at it.
Real quick.
It's money
here,
in
Ryan,
the bank.
Ryan, who would you throw?
Look, I'll be honest. I watched wrestling from 98 to 2006, and I stopped. And I haven't really gone back and watched it full time since. I mean, I caught bits and pieces of other companies over the years, whether it be TNA or ECW, or when it was still around at the time, or whatever it was. And then, I've checked out Monday Night Raws here and there, or what's the other one, AEW, which is like tearing it up right now. So I really can't say. I don't have enough info in front of me. But if I had to put, if you put somebody in a corner, even though you never put Baby in a corner, maybe Batista. I don't know, because Batista is a 7 feet, 300-pound giant like my boy is, Kevin Nash. Looking at you, brother. He's very intimidating. He's jacked, and he can deliver power bombs like nobody's business, like my boy Kevin did back in the day. So I probably threw. I mean, even though Batista evolved on his own, he did a fine job of it. I mean, the guy's got 50,000 tattoos that can mop the floor with you from here and twice on Sunday. I'm just saying, Dave. I mean, you're jacked, dude. I probably throw Dave Batista in there. That's the only answer I can come up with without having more information in front of me. I'd probably go with him.
Willow?
You know what? Ryan has said it best. I unfortunately, like Ryan, stopped watching after a while. The gimmicks kind of got to me after a while, and the storylines. If they would have done less soap opera, more along the lines of trying to showcase every character as much as they could, but without the overly gimmicky stuff. I think it would have been a little bit better, but that's my opinion. But I honestly, they did a really good job promoting during that time. That was all it was, is like promotion and trying to get people to watch, and they did good on the promotion. But yeah, I can't decide to change anything right now.
Yeah. Well,
what about you two?
You get to go.
Nicole, anybody?
So for me, which I think is somebody who gets a lot less, I think he's underrated now, is Randy Orton.
I was gonna say.
And so I know he came in. I mean, he came in after.
Mm-hmm.
He came in quite a few years after, but I think that where he is now, in his ability in the ring, and just the way he carries himself now, I think he would have fit in really well back then. But I think he would have kind of been, the person that you least expected. And another person is, I know, like he had a mouth that dropped a lot right before he left, and that was CM Punk. And so, like, to put them back then, I think it would have been interesting to see what they could have done. During Evolution, I had a lot of hate for Orton. Like, I just didn't get him. I just didn't get it. And then when things started playing out, as the Viper, and as I saw him grow into his own person, I think he became much more important to me. And it's funny because when Edge came back at the Royal Rumble, I think kind of solidified that for me, because I was like, okay, this is a guy who has a lot of skill, and I can trust him with my man. Like, I don't want to see him get hurt again. I want him to have the goodbye that he should have gotten, as opposed to the one that made him kind of ring. I want to put him in good hands. So
Orton was the only guy for Edge's return, but that's also for another show.
Yeah.
Right.
What about you, Brian? Who would you put back in the past?
I said Styles.
You said Styles.
Oh, you did say that. I just
What's so
wanna
cool
say,
about this little segment? Go ahead.
Rated R Edge. That was a top-notch. That is my favorite section of Edge's career, is when he became the Rated R superstar and became the ultimate opportunist, the most dastardly villain who would make you love him. He did what they did back in the Attitude Era, which is make you hate him and make you love him in the same damn sentence. And when I think he got
a 5
injured.
second pose guy, Edge.
I love that too. But I think he got injured and he had to drop the title.
Yeah, they do.
And I told my dad, I was like, dude, he's like, oh, how sad are you? I was like, I'm so sad. He's like, I know you loved Edge, that dickhead. Because he was like deep heel at that point. I think that was right after he took out Undertaker or something like that.
But if you think about it, he needed to turn. I mean, like, he needed to reinvigorate himself like the Undertaker did so many times. And I think that's what gave him the ability to stay and to stay relevant. And even with the return now, it's like, I'm so glad he's back.
I'm glad he's back because I didn't want his damn last match to be with Del Rio.
Thank you. That woman-beating son of a bitch.
But, like, it's funny because he's only 7 years older than me, which is really strange in the whole scheme of things because he was way too old for me when I loved him first. So I just like I forget because he comes back and he is still rated R, but he is not. He's like
very grizzled.
Mark, like that whole like struggling, like the wrestling with himself kind of thing, like that. And I think that Randy Orton brings the best out in him when they're in the ring together. And I mean, I know it's hard to say. It's hard to quantify what's happening now in the world we live in when there's no audience, and we're missing from that entire equation. So, like, that could be a whole nother show too. But like, like when he came back, I was watching when the Hardys came back, and I shit a brick because I literally had just seen them at the freaking barbecue they had where I met Jeff Hardy, and I was like, oh,
that morning,
that morning, and then I'm sitting there watching, and I'm going, holy shit, like
Mania.
I was super excited.
That was crazy.
And so
that was
they got a pop, and I was like, oh, and then Edge came back, and like he had his pop in my chair, and I screaming my head off and acting like a crazy person, but the universe wasn't there to share it. It's like same with Drew McIntyre. Like it's kind of that we got, we got
freaking screwed with that one.
Well,
I don't
it really. Well, we also missed the Undertaker's last match. We missed it. I had tickets to it from my children. That they could have seen it, and we didn't get to because of all this, and it sucks. But I think that's taken us way too far off of what is supposed to be a fond memory show, and that is the Attitude Era. But what was cool was that each of us, Brian, when you asked who would we take back, every person named somebody else, and so I think that's a really cool thing here at the end. Everybody picked a different wrestler to go back to the Attitude Era.
That's a good question.
Thank you for letting me go laugh.
We all need a happy ending.
Where can everybody find you guys on social media? We'll start with you, Matt.
We'll start with you.
You. There's like 4 you.
Brian, look at the script.
Well, especially for all the folks that like the Attitude Era that maybe don't watch wrestling so much anymore. Come follow me. I'm pretty heavily involved in it and still working. I'll be at shows even as soon as next weekend. I go by the Young Professor on Facebook. That's probably the best place to catch me where most of my content is. It's at Young Professor G on the Twitter, and on Instagram it's at MG the Young Professor. And Brian, Nicole, thank you guys for having me on, and thank you to my fellow panel mates, Thor, Ryan and Willow, thank you guys for being here. This was a lot of fun.
Thor,
Thank you
where
for
can
joining
people
us.
find you?
You can find me on Facebook at Thomas Carter Rochester -actor, Instagram at Thomas Carter Rochester, all one word, no hyphens, no spaces. Twitter, you can find me at TC Rochester Act. That is TC Rochester ACT. You can also find me on YouTube, where I do stupid shows of me as Thor, son of Dale, watching The Mandalorian season 1. It's wild. It's awesome. I've predicted a lot of things that are going to happen in season 2. Thank you, Dirt Sheets. That is Life of Thor on YouTube. And you can also find my podcast, Lights Thunder Action, here on the Bookface. Also right here on this same YouTube channel that you're watching right now. Tomorrow at 1 Eastern Standard Time.
Oh my God. Oh, so Ryan, as you're down there, where can people find you?
I don't know if I can follow any of these up. I'm going to try anyway. All right, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for having me on this show. I really appreciate it. It was great to meet new people, especially Matt. Thanks for being on here with us. Well, I'm not yes, sir. And when I'm not a limousine riding, jet flying, kiss stealing, wheeling dealing, son of a gun that I am, you can find me all over the interwebs on Twitter and Instagram at RyanRPM5. Follow me on Letterboxd if you're a hardcore movie fan like myself. Letterboxd.com/RyanMovieBuff. You can see my hot takes right there. You can also catch my podcast. It's called The Nerdcast. I talk about movies past and present. Drop new episodes each and every week. And also check out our YouTube channel. It's called Nerd Culture. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. At It's Nerd Culture. You can find us there. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. And I hope to be on the show sometime soon. And I'll see you all next time. Back to you at the desk.
Can I just say that the floor is lava? The floor is lava.
The floor is lava.
It is lava right now as we're watching our 6-year-old jump from chair to chair.
This is why we can't have Mike sitting.
Well, thank you for another episode of Reels and Heels as we're watching our kid jump.
And personal thank you to Jeff Hardy for saying it was really cool to have the next generation of backyard wrestlers.
And you'll be joining me next week as we're talking Godzilla and Kaiju. Nicole will be on vacation.
Good job.
That's okay.
So we're looking for a sign off. So until we find a sign off, Thor, go ahead and sign us off.
This has been Reels and Heels, Attitude Era of WWE, baby.